go ahead and call this Norwood City Council meeting to order. Please rise for a moment of reflection and the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franson? Here. Mrs. Hoover?
Here.
Ms. Royce? Here. Mrs. Bowling?
Here.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Here.
Mr. Burton?
Here.
Mr. Braden?
We have all members present. Moving on to amendment of the agenda. We are adding the minutes from March 12th, March 26th, April 2nd, and April 9th. Those all should have been emailed to everyone. And we are also adding an appropriations ordinance, which will be ordinance, it'll appear as M2 on the agenda. Mrs. Winterbauer.
I move we amend the agenda as stated.
Motion by Mrs. Winterbauer to amend the agenda as stated. Ms. Royce.
I'll second.
Seconded by Ms. Royce. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franson? Yes. Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Burton?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
All members present voting yes, the motion passes. Moving on to minutes of previous meetings. We have the minutes from March 12th, March 26th, April 2nd, and April 9th. Ms. Royce.
Move we accept and receive the minutes.
Motion by Ms. Royce to accept the minutes. Seconded by Mr. Gerton. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Gerton?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Moving on to special presentations. We have Chief Sumner with the Norwood Police Department.
So this is our 2023 annual report. I was told this had to be narrowed down to 15 minutes. That's not going to happen. But I know that you guys got a busy agenda, so I'm going to try to streamline through it, and we'll talk about some important aspects of what's going on in our police department that happened last year. All right. So as you know, Chief Kramer retired after 27 years here, 12 years as chief. I took over after that in May, and when I took over, we had 4 goals. The first goal was to create a school resource officer. It's critical that we have an officer back in our school that we haven't had in 12 years. He's doing phenomenal work engaging with the youth between that middle school and high school level. The second goal was to diversify our department. We hired our first black police officer this last go-around. The second was to encourage and assign female officers into our training program as instructors. 11% of our workforce is females, and they weren't into those areas of instructing our training. So we have since selected one of them to be a firearms instructor, another one to be a defensive tactics instructor. So that's right on par. The third goal is to create a community engagement team, which we've done. Sergeant Hoffman's taken over charge of that, interacting with you guys whenever you need it to try to streamline some direct communication so you don't receive a lot of misinformation on social media. And then the fourth one is the Ohio Collaborative, which I'll go in depth and talk to a little bit further on down the road. So just to touch base with this, not to go too far in this, but these are our core values. I'm sorry. This isn't just placements on a slide. This is actually the bedrock and the foundation of what we expect our officers to act and behave with their professionalism each day that they come to work. Each one of these, it's on every piece of paper within inside the police department. It's on our evaluations. It's on our counseling forums. It's on our discipline forums. It's on our recognition forums. So this is kind of like the bedrock and the foundation that people that wear this uniform is expected to serve the city. So just a quick organizational structure. We have a chief of police. We have 4 lieutenants. We have 8 sergeants, 33 police officers. On the civilian side, we have a secretary, 2 police clerks, and 4 auxiliary officers. So in 2023, we had a total of 52 city employees under police command. Our patrol, it's our biggest one yet. So basically, this is just divided up into 2 12-hour shifts. We have 2 teams working days, 2 teams working nights. Minimum staffing is on each shift. We moved our canine officer into the middle of that as kind of a pilot program so he can work half on days, half on nights, so we can utilize him. Just a quick patrol statistics here. We had 82 OVI arrests last year. We had 648 auto accidents. That's extremely high. That's something that we're working on already this year. The other 4 columns pretty much are fall in line with like community checks that we do. We do business checks, residential vacation checks, directed patrols, and almost 1,000 park checks in 2023. Our auto accidents, again, the top 5 locations for our crashes are I-71, Montgomery Road, the Norwood lateral, our 40 feet of Madison Road, and then Edmondson Road leading up to Rookwood. So just a quick overview of our traffic stops from patrol. We've had a total of 3,200 traffic stops last year. We have more cautions than cites. That's the way it should be. So talking about our part 1 and part 2 crimes, we have violent crimes, we have nonviolent crimes. If you look at the violent crimes, we have arson, rape, aggravated assault, burglary, robbery, and homicide and murder. So year over year on those stats, we have decreased our violent crime by 12%. So our burglaries went down a lot. Our assaults kind of stayed the same. Our rapes went down by half. Our robberies went up a couple, and our homicide dropped from 2 in 2022 to 1 last year. Now our nonviolent crime, this is, I have missing persons and overdoses in there. That's not necessarily a crime, but that's just to give you an idea of kind of what's going on in the city and what we're investigating. So we had almost 38 missing persons. Our overdoses went down by 7 last year. Our fail to comply, which I'll talk about in a second, that kind of skews the whole increase in percentages. Our sex offenses went up a little bit. Possession of drugs stays the same. Domestic violences went down a lot, which is very positive. Criminal trespass stayed about the same, and our criminal damaging increased. So if you take the fail to comply out of these charts, then our year over year is pretty much unchanged. The reason why we have so many fail to complies is we'll get to in the next slide. 1, we have a strict pursuit policy. We don't pursue unless it's a violent offense or some type of crime, some type of felony crime. So with the next slide, if you look at our thefts, we had a 101% increase in motor vehicle thefts last year. So obviously when you have that many auto thefts, that's more auto thefts out there, stolen vehicles out there, more for us to try to stop. When we go to stop them, they take off because of our pursuit policy. We don't chase. Other thefts, shoplifting is off the charts, and that's more or less a Rookwood thing. That is Ulta, Sephora, Old Navy, TJ Maxx. Everything else is about the same. So our shoplifting and our motor vehicle theft are the ones that's kind of skewing those theft stats. Moving on to our criminal investigation section, which is our detectives. We have 4 detectives. We have a subset of that CIS, which is Norwood Drug Task Force, which is run by a sergeant, 2 agents, and we have an agent assigned to the DEA that he works down at the federal building. So the purpose of CIS, just to elaborate real quick, they're there to investigate crimes that are not cleared by uniform patrol. Last year, they had over 400 cases assigned to them, which is an increase of 88 over the year 2022. They investigated that one murder that I talked about and 5 shootings, which was either a person shot or directly shot at in 2023. But just a quick stat of just some activity there. The cases assigned, the felony arrests that they did, felony charges, misdemeanors and misdemeanor charges. As you can note in the slide, from 21 to 22 to 23, you see a steep increase every year, every category. We have one training lieutenant. He works at our police training facility. He handles our Ohio Collaborative, our training. He's our training coordinator. He handles our policy procedures, our pursuit review, and he does our bias-based policing review. We have one lieutenant that's in charge of our administration. He handles our public information, our social media, our records. He's our internal TAC lasso, which takes care of all of our security measures for our internal computers. He does our audits to make sure people are using the computers the way that they should be. He's also in charge of our recruitment, our hiring, and he does our field training officer when a new recruit comes in and ready to go. Last year, we hired 6 people. We had Dylan Masson. We hired him at the beginning of the year, and then he was an intern from UC. He was completing his degree and liked what he saw here and took the test, scored number 1, and he's on night shift doing really good work. The other 3 came from they're the experienced officers that we hired from lateral transfers. So they're all out on their own now. They're doing good work, halves on nights, fews on days. To recognize some personnel, some awards, Lieutenant Matt Klingelhofer, he was awarded the Norwood Chamber of Commerce Police Officer of the Year Award last year. The 3 officers on the left, bottom left, Officers Castania, Strunk, Miller, and Goodwin, they all 4 received some life-saving awards for the preservation of human life on 2 separate incidences. Detective Siegel, Detective Webster, not pictured due to their assignments. They received some Knights of Columbus Officer of the Year Award in 2022, which was awarded last year. And Detective Webster, he had 2 awards. He's getting the Knights of Columbus Officer of the Year Award next month, and as well as the Cincinnati Citizen Police Association Officer of the Month. And I'm going to email you guys a full copy of this because there's a lot of good reading in there. I just don't have time to acknowledge all this good work that we're doing today. So, and he's one of them that probably should have got a lot more awards. He himself, along with Cincinnati Police, coordinated some investigations that traveled all over the tri-state and different states for robberies that we experienced and some burglaries that started here in Norwood and then fanned out to Indiana, Kentucky, all the way up to Cleveland. So I'm going to hit on this a little bit. This is what we call our accountability. So we work with the Office of Criminal Justice Services and the Ohio Collaborative. And this covers what holds us accountable for these bias-free policing standards, investigation, employee misconduct, vehicle pursuits, police use of force. And so basically what this Ohio Collaborative is, it is a 12-person panel of law enforcement experts and community leaders from throughout the state that established Ohio's first state law enforcement standards in 2015. Governor then Kasich established this Community Police Advisory Board to oversee the implementation of recommendations from the Ohio Task Force on Community Police Relations. And basically what this is this is a state standard that Ohio wants all police agencies to follow. It's not mandatory, it's all volunteer, but what it does is it holds departments accountable by following the recommendations from the state. It limits risk to the city, and it creates a standard that everybody kind of falls in line with. So they can't say that Norwood's out here doing Norwood things. You know, it's a standard and a guideline. And this was not done before I took over in March, even though that we had the policies in place. We just never collaborated with Ohio to have their agents come down and vet our policies and get certified in. So they set a minimum standard of basically policies within a group. Each policy is vetted. Each policy can state it has to have a policy. officers have to acknowledge and be aware of what the policy is by reading and signing it. They have to be proficient in it, and it has to be compliant. So once we are to a level where we're ready to have someone come down and look at our policies, we make that call. They come down from the state, they look at our records, they look at our management systems, all of our documentations to see if we're doing what we're saying that we're doing. And then we get certified in those groups. So since we took over, Group 1 is certified, and we are in compliance with Ohio's use of force with the recruitment and hiring practices. We are in compliance and certified in Group 3, which covers 3 policies of community engagement, body-worn cameras, telecommunicator training. We are certified and in compliance of Group 3, which covers bias-free policing, investigation, and employee misconduct. And we have submitted our vehicle pursuit. It is in progress. We should be in compliance with that soon. And then I've been told that we will have completed Group 5 and Group 6 by the end of the year. And once we complete all these 6 groups, we will be one of the few departments in Hamilton County that's compliant in all 6 groups. Most agencies stop at 4 or 5, but we're going all the way because we believe that policing and positive youth interactions and crisis intervention is pretty solid that we need to be involved in. So we're going to run into some use of force, which covers our accountability. As you know, we do have force, or we do use force. It's not pretty. Sometimes it is what it is. But every use of force that's above balance displacement or an escort hold, we do a report on. So we follow the Supreme Court decisions of Graham versus Connor about what factors consider a use of force. So, and if you look at our use of forces from 2023, these are some darn good numbers. We've had 6 use of forces, and we've had almost 26,000 contacts a year. So that drops down to 0.02%. So that's a pretty phenomenal number. We're going to use that as our benchmark moving forward. And that's actually down 50% from 2022, which we had 12. So to further break down our numbers for our reports, we examined additional demographics, which is part of the accountability under the Ohio Collaborative. We took in consideration these subjects' mental states. We don't believe that any of them was under the influence of drugs or alcohol. 2 of them we believe to be emotionally disturbed persons. 4 of them are either unknown or other, which means they don't fit into those other 2 categories. Suspect demographics were all 6 males, no females, 5 Caucasian or white suspects, 1 African American or black. The age group pretty much falls in line with every age group. The one with the 2, I'll get to in a minute. It was 1 person. He was having a bad day. Police calls resulting from the type of use of force incidents. There were 4 resulted from dispatch runs, 2 incidents resulted from officer-initiated action, and 0 resulted from traffic stops, which is another positive number. We don't want any use of forces occurring from traffic stops. The locations of those use of forces, 5 occurred on the street, 1 occurred in the police facility. So moving forward in 2024, we're still going to conduct ourselves in an exemplary manner that we always have. We've seen 47 officers killed in the line of duty so far this year, and we will always make sure that officer safety is our number 1 priority. Here's a breakdown of these 6. It's just a quick snippet to give you. There's 2 things that to look at on this is there's 5 persons involved in use of force. There was 6 incidents. So the one that occurred June 27th, that was the same person that happened twice. So this was an investigation of a theft suspect who walked over to Victory Park. He was found to have some 5 open warrants. We had to use force to get him into custody. We had to take him to the hospital. He didn't want to be at the hospital. He tried to escape the hospital, fight UC police. So we were involved in this guy again. So overall, again, almost 26,000 contacts, and we've had to use force on 5 people. Those are pretty phenomenal numbers. So moving forward with our annual bias-based policing report, this is a report that is generated every year and given to me to look at and approve. This report includes, but not limited to, traffic stops by race and gender. And this report is generated by our PL9 system. We also take into account every citizen's complaint filed, every disposition, every action taken. If there's any suggestions or solutions, any recommended training needs, or any recommended policy changes. So this is a simple breakdown of our by gender, by race, out of 3,206 stops. The only number that looks out of place here is the one that says unknown with 154. That shouldn't be 154 unknown people. And what happened was that's a data error that we caught halfway through the year. And what had occurred was when you make a traffic stop and you run someone's driver's license out, the information that comes up in the police computer is directly sent from the BMV. Well, if you look at your driver's license, the BMV does not distinguish race on a driver's license. So 3/4 of the way through the year, they put an export button on our computer to export that information into our record management system because we have to document these stops. So instead of typing block by block, they tried to make it easier. Well, when that information ported over, it left out the race category, which threw it into an unknown category in our system. So the officers now know that. So now each time there's a stop, they have to close it out, go back in, and make sure that the proper data is filled out. So that's why that number is so high. Moving on with the bias-based policing report, when we talk about citizens' complaints, we've only received 3 complaints against officers accused for racial profiling. These were taken into account. There's 2 that were considered unfounded, 1 that was not sustained. In 2024, we'll not need to conduct training regarding this policy, which is done every 2 years. The data for the traffic stop demographics does appear to be a fair representation of the population that travels our streets, both locally, because of where we're at. We're landlocked Cincinnati, but tourists, employees, and local businesses, there's no recommended policy changes at this time. So when we get to the citizens' complaint, we've only had a total of 10 citizens' complaints in 2023, and that's also a very low number that you should be proud of. So 3 of those, like I said, were categorized by traffic stop, allegedly being profiled. Those were all investigated, not sustained. The other one was unfounded. The last one was investigated by me in July. That was unfounded. So all of our complaints were either unfounded, exonerated, except for the very last one, which is kind of a behavior issue. It's kind of the only category that I find. And basically what that was, somebody complained that they felt that the officer maybe wasn't acting professional. So when that was investigated, the investigating officer found some other type of infraction that was not necessarily listed in the complaint itself, but maybe something that the officer could have done better, maybe didn't follow those core values that we talk about every single day. So that was listed as misconduct, not based on the complaint. These are still extremely low numbers given the amount of people that our officers have contact with every year. So our drug task force, we'll hit this real quick. Their primary focus is street level drug dealers. They are a very versatile unit. They do have one person assigned as a DEA agent that works down at the federal building. We can utilize federal resources, then they can help work on large scale narcotic conspiracy investigations. So just I'm going to go over some quick highlights for their some of their high-end cases. Some of this they're still in the judicial process, so there's very limited information. But the first one to summarize, these guys got a tip about a high-level drug trafficker residing in Norwood. They investigated this. They identified the target, the address. They contacted our DEA task force officer. After that investigation was completed in October, they seized 41 kilograms of cocaine with a street value of $700,000, and they seized $1.25 million in U.S. currency from his residence at 1 Rookwood on Edwards Road. The second investigation was an investigation where we had an anonymous tip come in for a distributing large amounts of marijuana in Norwood and Pleasant Ridge. A search warrant was conducted there on Floral Avenue, and they recovered almost 4 pounds of marijuana. And to be very clear on this, that information came in from an anonymous tip through our website. So it's very important that when people can use our website and every one of those complaints get investigated, they come to me, they go to our drug unit, so I know which ones come through. And then when I go check on the drug unit a couple times a week, I pick up their binder, I go through the reports, and I ask them questions and see where they're at in these investigations. But just to be clear too, these are very complex investigations. So these things take a long time. So when someone's complaining that maybe someone's selling weed, they're not going to get an answer back in a day or two. I mean, you can see from 2 of these 3, these started well in the beginning of the year and they didn't end until October. So, and the only people that know that our drug task force is investigating something is our drug task force. Patrol officers don't know what our drug guys are investigating. So it's a very complex investigation. There are certain criteria that they have to hit, and it takes a long time. So just know, encourage people to call in because we do look at those. The third one was an additional drug trafficking investigation with Gulf Manor, where our undercover officers did conduct multiple controlled purchases of narcotics. Once that investigation was over in October, they seized $115,000 U.S. currency, 3 firearms, 82 grams of cocaine, and almost 10 grams of crack. So these guys are working hard. This is just an overview of the amount in grams that they've recovered and the value, the street value in dollars. You can see from the first slide, in 2022, the majority of their drug investigations were marijuana because those are off the chart, 54,000 grams. So it really just depends on where that investigation leads them and what it is they're dealing. But as you can see on the first chart, when you get to the methamphetamine and the crack cocaine, that seems to be now what's the hot drug on the street. In 2022, they were very low, and now in 2023, there's kind of significant increase in the amount that's been recovered by our drug officers. So, all right, I'll skip that one. Our auxiliary police, we're trying to get one hired full-time. He's doing a phenomenal job. They pulled in 835 parking citations last year, expired plates leading the way with violation of posted signs and 72-hour parking. They're on pace probably to hit about 1,200 this year. Officer Faust is working very hard. He's putting in a lot of hours and he's doing a lot of good work and taking a lot of abandoned vehicles off the street. So when we still talk about accountability, we're going to talk about community engagement, and I'm almost done here, I'm sorry. But we have what's called the NPA, which is a nonprofit police organization, which was created in 2011 from our police officers that wanted to try to give back to the community and worthy causes around the city. And last year, we gave away almost $24,000 to different charities, different events, people in need. This is just some of our partnerships that we help out pretty much on a yearly basis. We have Norwood Together, Norwood Athletics, our K-9 program, Norwood Christmas Town, Inner City, Soccer Academy, the Norwood Business and Professional Women's Club. The list that I have there, I'll just point out 2 things real quick. The East Palestine disaster out in eastern Ohio that happened, I think last year or the year before. Our officers saw that. They rented a U-Haul truck. They loaded up with water, non-perishable goods, and they drove out there and gave it to the family and the residents out there. And they did it on their own time. The donations to Norwood Athletics for the baseball, the soccer, and the knothole, that's just not giving these organizations money, but these are helping fund so students can participate in organized sports. Because a lot of the money that they get, they don't have the funds to buy their gear or their uniforms or pay their fees. So without those donations, we would have a lot of students that wouldn't be part of any organized sports. And, we think that's a critical aspect of at least giving to the Norwood School District. I'm almost done. 2024, the Center for Local Government, we are now into a contract with them, and what's that going to do is that's going to provide us state-of-the-art virtual training. It should be coming around at the end of this year. And that's a justified use of force firearms training simulator, which is a don't shoot scenario that improves the speed and quality of officers' decision making. The Street Smarts virtual reality simulator, that's another state-of-the-art virtual reality training where you can create thousands of scenarios, drop your officers in the middle of any one of those scenarios, and see what type of decision making that they do. So this is good training that we're going to start. We have officers going to police bike training in May. We like to have our officers on bikes. Unfortunately, all of our now certified bike officers got promoted, so they're supervisors. So we need to get some younger guys in here to get trained, and hopefully we'll have a lot of bikes out on patrol this summer. To try to combat the speeding problem, we're going to be doing a lot of NHTSA highway traffic safety programs. We're going to be enforcing the speed enforcement, aggressive driving, texting. We are part of the Hamilton County OVI Task Force, which is a monthly task force that goes out and focuses on OVIs. We will have an OVI checkpoint with the Ohio State Patrol, either late June or July. We're trying to get a second one in the fall. And then for us, department-wise, we're short 3 officers. I spoke to Civil Service today, so we should be giving an entrance exam. We're technically short 2, but 1 supervisor. Once the supervisor gets promoted, then we need to fill that back end, that 3rd officer. Hopefully we can buy some speed display cameras. I know that was a priority to put on the budget to put around the city. Our old ones don't work anymore. For our capital planning scenarios, we're going to focus really hard on our police training facility. We want to make that a regional training facility where people can come outside of Norwood and train with us in our city and bring them in. We do phenomenal police work. It's very fast paced. So we can provide a lot of positive training to other departments. Plus, we want to be a leader in this county. So Darren, hopefully, is going to be working on our HVAC system. We're going to get the range cleaned up and get the range remodeled, and we should be good to go. And then the thing that we'll hit on again at the end of the year is some police cruisers. That's really our only problem that we have. Our cruisers at the end of life. We need to get on some type of plan where they maintain under warranty. None of our cars are under warranty. Our repair budget's skyrocketing. It's more than it would be if we just bought a cruiser. But that is in the planning phase, and hopefully we can get that worked out so we're not up here every single year trying to hustle cars. And then a large evidence facility, whether it's a pole barn or a garage, that's kind of critical to our detectives and our evidence chain of custody. If we don't ever want to lose a homicide case or a shooting case because we don't have a facility to hold those type of large evidence. We used a safety lane, but unfortunately everybody has used a safety lane. Everybody has access to it, and we could not go into court of law and say that it's secure and no one has access to it. So we're looking at that. We have options, and hopefully there's some progress on that this year. And that is all. And I apologize.
Thank you. Any questions?
You will get reports emailed to you. Please read them because there's a lot of good investigations by our officers that are doing great work that just didn't have time to highlight today. All right?
Thank
Questions?
you. Any questions for Chief Sumner? Mrs. Hoover.
Sorry, I don't have a question, but I just wanted to thank you. You've just been so phenomenal to me in all the times we've met with the community safety meeting we did, 2 of them in Ward 4. You were very helpful, present for conversations. The first responders event that you guys put on was lovely. You also worked with me for getting the Kia locks for cars. And also, after a conversation about gun locks, you did a whole week-long thing on gun safety. You really listen when we have conversations, and that feels really good. You always have thoughtful insight. You're very community-oriented, and I feel like we are so lucky to have you
at our head. So thank you for everything you've done, both for me on council and for the community. And, you know, this is fantastic.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Girton?
Just wanted to say thanks to Officer Faust. With the lateral being shut down, I think he's kind of an unsung hero of keeping our lanes for traffic open, and so I don't think he gets credit for that, or I don't think he gets enough credit for that.
Right.
But
Yeah,
thank
he's
him
doing a
for
lot
us.
of good work. Thanks.
Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is a public hearing. So the City of Norwood will hold a public hearing on April 23rd, 2024, and April 29th, 2024, at Norwood City Hall, second floor, Council Chambers, 4645 Montgomery Road, Norwood, Ohio 45212, for the purpose of hearing public comments on the City of Norwood's community development needs, and to discuss the possible submission of one or more Community Development Block Grant, CDBG, applications for the next three-year cycle, 2024 to 2026. The CDBG program is administered by the State of Ohio Office of Community Development, OCD, and will make funds available to eligible local governments over the three-year program cycle for housing, economic development, public facilities, public infrastructure, and planning activities with the principal purpose of benefiting low or moderate income persons. The City of Norwood is applying for any available amount in CDBG funds for those purposes. The hearing will provide further information about the CDBG program and will allow for citizen participation in the development of any proposed grant applications and/or to provide technical assistance to develop alternate proposals. Comments on the CDBG program or proposed projects will be received at this time. The public hearing is being conducted pursuant to Section 570.486, Subpart 1 of the CFR, and in compliance with the requirements of the Housing and Community Development Act of 1974 as amended. I will go ahead and declare this public hearing open. Anyone to speak in favor of this matter, please step forward. Anyone to speak in favor of this matter? Anyone to speak in favor of this matter? Seeing none, anyone to speak against this matter? Anyone to speak against this matter? Anyone to speak against this matter? Seeing none, I will hereby declare this public hearing closed. Moving on to requests to address council. I will go with the order in which these were received. And first, request to address council is Lynn Ellis.
At the April 15th Victory Park Community Conversation, I heard a council person bring up the records request, which was mine. I thought it was worth talking about because this is part of the business of council, which, by the way, we got lectured about in a previous council meeting. Have you forgotten that you're supposed to represent all of us? Not just a few, not your own agenda, all of us. It's apparent to those of us that are standing with the veterans that you all are marginalizing this group of people, and probably the older crowd standing with them. Veterans are those, and those that are serving have given you the ability to sit here and marginalize them. Yes, the city owns the park. But since the 20s, this city dedicated Victory Memorial over and over and over again to our veterans and those that have died for our freedoms. This is one of two parks that's not permitted to have alcohol. There are many larger and underused parks here in Norwood. You all keep saying that this has nothing to do with the businesses that surround this park and alcohol in general. Yet, it seems some of you believe that the only way to activate this park is by allowing alcohol. 2 weeks ago, I presented data that said 76% of the veterans parks in Ohio and northern Kentucky don't allow alcohol, and the majority of those cities, villages, townships, etc., don't allow alcohol in their parks at all. Instead of hearing the people and the vets, you have chosen to double down on your agenda. You have chosen to disrespect opposing ideologies and instead use an us and them mentality. I cannot understand why this one park, why? Just saying that it's centrally located is not enough. Doubling down does not make it right. There's already been threatening phone calls made to at least one of our veterans that oppose this. Again, you don't need alcohol in a park to activate it. In a conversation with a friend, they brought up a good point. If someone gets hurt in this park due to alcohol or a large crowd, the liability is on the city. Who's going to police these events? Will you require the event holders to have off-duty police officers to patrol large events that are included with the alcohol? Will there be a surety bond in case of injury or destruction? There are too many unintended consequences when you have large events with alcohol. Even Holy Trinity festivals have off-duty police present. Small place, big crowd, alcohol. I'm asking you all to think about this. Play that tape all the way out and think of the unintended consequences. Thank you.
Thank you. The next request.
Can I ask her a question?
Yes, you may. Mr. Garden.
Ms. Ellis? Can you show me anywhere in the ordinance where it says that we're going to try to create large events with alcohol?
I would say the ordinance doesn't say that, but if I get a permit, it's possible for me to have a large event, is it not?
No.
Where does it say that?
It says no alcohol anywhere in the park except by permit in the designated picnic
That's what I
areas.
just said.
No, you didn't.
I said, if I have a permit, then I can have a large event. That's what I said.
That's what you said.
Mr. Garden. Questions through the chair.
Yes, sir. Sorry.
The next request to address council is Ricky Paul.
My name is Ricky Paul. I live at 2320 Lyle Lane, Norwood. Who is Leon M. Barnett? The name that's bared on our post. He was a 24-year-old first lieutenant from Norwood, Ohio, who was KIA in 1918. 1919, the American Legion was founded. In 1920, the Leon M. Barnett post here in Norwood was chartered. We have been in this community for over 100 years. 100 years. His wife didn't pass away until she was 75. He received the Distinguished Service Cross for his valor. His wife received his death notice at 1937 Hudson Avenue. His name is on the memorial. It's the first name. Has anybody ever looked at those names? Has anybody looked at those names? To actually see Leon M. Barnett, Leon Meyer Barnett, buried in Spring Grove Cemetery. One of Norwood's heroes. And we're just shoving him off to the side. We're just pushing him off to the side. I went to a meeting the other night, an informational meeting, which is kind of dysfunctional in my opinion. I listened to Mrs. Hoover talk about the increased patrols by the Norwood police, in their cars, out of their cars. I listened to the lieutenant say, hey, sometimes my guys walk around, sometimes they don't. Less than an hour after that, I listened to the Recreation Commissioner, Mike Gabbard, say, we put up cameras outside the bathrooms in the park. Oh my God, you don't want to see what's going on there. Jeff, the first council meeting that they had the first reading, he said that his kids were afraid to go there. It's a scary place. Did he call the police? No. The police say they have they patrol the park. Obviously they don't. And you're going to say, well, it's at night. Well, that's when the activity takes place. You know, 2 months ago, you passed an ordinance right here, 2 months ago, February the 13th, I believe. February the 13th, leaving Victory Park status as amended, as a memorial park. What happened in 2 months? I can tell you what happened because I'm looking at 5 of you. It's the company right across the street, the cider company. That's what happened. We're asking you to leave us alone. There's 46 to 49 acres of park in the city of Norwood. A lot bigger places to play. There's nothing in Victory Park for youth. So why have alcohol? I heard we got to have more accessibility. We got to have more family events. We got to have alcohol. I mean, my family drinks beer. I'm not going to lie. But I don't need to drink there. That park is available every day, all day. And how many of you guys have planned events there? None. I haven't seen anybody. In the last year? Okay, there you go. All right, do you have alcohol there? No, absolutely not. And you still enjoyed your time and did what you had to do. We're merely asking you to leave us park alone. When that memorial was built, the Post 123 were the guardians of the park. And then when the Victory Park Veterans Association came along with Jerry Owens and stuff, and they thought they would take the park over and see that things got done, see that we had memorial service, see that we had a Veterans Day service. We always had a seat at the table. We always were asked our opinion. We don't run the park. We don't want to run the park. But we are asked our opinion about changes and things that happen. Not in this, not one phone call, sent an email. I got a response 3 weeks later. Found my email in the junk file. I mean, that happens. But we never even got a response. Not a question. You guys removed us from the table. Why is that? Because you know right away that you're going to shove this down our throat. You're going to pass it. You're going to drink over in the park, whether we like it or whether we don't like it. That's exactly what's happening here. And I would ask Mr. Moore to look into the ethics of 5 people that have something to do with the cider company that are providing drinks in Hunter Park on May the 11th, that they look into this to see if this is an ethics violation. These people even voting on this ordinance. I urge you, please leave this park alone and leave it at the Memorial Gardens that it is. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next request to address council is Dave Bentz.
Ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you for the opportunity to address you regarding this issue. I've been here to 4 meetings, I believe, and another one down at the community center. And honestly, I think we're being placated with excellent skills. I think that the decision's already made, and it breaks my heart. Victory Park is a memorial park. I've said it every time I've been up here. It seems like that term is lost on some these days. If you look at the names that are around that tank of people that served, some of whom have died, my grandfather's up there, my father's up there, I'm up there, a lot of my friends are up there, and thank God, a lot of them did not die in war, but brought the wounds home with them. These are all things that we find in that park, and as veterans, we consider them very deeply. And it's extremely disappointing that we're still having this conversation months later. I have had conversations with Ms. Franzen. I've had conversations with John Braden. I've had conversations with Ms. Hoover. John was the only one who I felt was really in our corner. The other folks, they tell me that, they're considering taking everything into consideration. But, I don't feel that their minds are made up on this thing as far as helping us veterans through it. Now, I've sat in these seats with, well, not with you, but back in the 80s and 90s. I know how difficult decisions can be. I was one of the chairmen of the finance committee when GM pulled out, and I don't have to tell you the nightmare that was. So I understand the challenges that you face. But when you separate challenges from the city, from your personal wishes, something's broken there. And I just want to ask once again, and I imagine this will be for the final time, I pray that you do not pass this to me. But I'm going to ask once again that you do not allow alcohol in Victory Park. That park is better suited as a family park, as many people here have suggested. We've heard that money is available for a splash pad should you elect to install one. And, you know, I think that a family park, you put a splash pad in that park, you upgrade the swings and put some other things in there, allow us to get together and put some more memorial issues up there and respectful things to our veterans. These are the things I'm hoping that you will consider. I appreciate the chance to, again, to speak to you folks. Please do it. If you don't do it for yourselves, do it for us.
Thank you. Next request to address council is Bishop Sonny James.
Oh, boy. Let me first say I've spent several days thinking about Mr. Gears and how hospitable he's been to me. I've been thinking about Mr. Miracle. Thought about our law director. And I've thought about Mr. Braden and how far we've come. You know, I guess I struggle. Some of you know this. I'm generally a nice gentleman. But it's something about our administration. It's something about, and I've thought about our mayor. But it's something about how we process in this community. I recently went to a community meeting, and I thought we were there to discuss some of the differences of opinion. And I remember walking in, and I approached Miss Hoover, and I said, "Could you help me? I'm like, I may have jumped the gun on something too soon, and I just want to be on the right side." She shared some things, and then I went to some of my peers. I said, "Can you help me understand? I'm a little confused." And then Ms. Hoover said, "Well, to respect everyone's time, and by the way, if I get cut off today, I believe you have officers around, you can lock me up. But you will not cut me off today. Ms. Franzen, I can appreciate you here at council saying, 'Oh, Bishop, I apologize.' And Ms. Hoover, I can appreciate you sending me a message saying that I'm sorry for how I acted. But guys, we've come a long way." Oh, and I thought a lot about Donna Lake. We've come a long way. I was just in a meeting with tons of judges and clergy that look like me. And the topic of Norwood came up. And I found myself saying, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, hey, brothers, whoa, calm it down, calm it down. We're coming a long way. Give me another opportunity." But the way we continue to operate, to me, it looks like discrimination. And I believe all of you understand how I feel about that. It doesn't matter if it's one or two people. You got a room full of people here saying, "Please don't. But yet we have our first reading, we have our second reading, and some of you have bought into the idea, well, this will bring us money. What about the rights and the heart of other folks? My youngest son, Lemuel, 2 weeks from yesterday, will be flying out to South Jordan with the U.S. Marines. Guys, listen. When people go through things and you make them a promise, whether you were here when the promise was made or not, quit being so quick to overturn it. What's the rush? Oh, and by the way, cider company, if you have an event already scheduled on May the 11th, don't worry, you'll have a whole lot of other guests coming with you. And I'll be in front. But they're not coming to support, they're coming to say, if you are so dogmatic on moving forward without listening to the heart of the people of Norwood, we will be out here every time you open your doors. And there's nothing the police chief, there's nothing the mayor, there's nothing our city management can do to a protest. But come and make sure everybody's safe. But we all know protests detract patrons. Now, if you're in that big area, go right ahead. Handle that business. And so will we. A friendly protest cannot be denied, cannot be stopped. And all you have to do is just give this a little more time. Hear these people a little more. Just listen. I'm not saying one way or another. There might be good points to cut off half of the park and rename it or whatever you're thinking about doing. But before you deny any of these brothers and sisters of mine, you better ask yourself a question. Is this vote more important than theirs? I heard the buzzer. I'm closing with all due respect, Mr. Gears. Please do not make a vote on this tonight. Because if you do, go back to your homies, go back to your peers and say, get ready, make room, because he's coming with a whole lot of nice people that are going to say, not today. God bless you all. Let's make this community fabulous and include these people. Thank you.
The next request to address council is Cynthia Tincher.
I'm Cindy Tincher, 1843 Mills. In 2023, an ordinance was presented without vital consultation of our veterans as mandated by the ordinance. This oversight, or perhaps deliberate negativity, is a profound breach of trust. However, this incident is pointing to bigger issues. Issues of transparency, integrity, and accountability. And I'm sorry, I'm nervous. We have witnessed questionable actions and tactics that impact the community's trust level. And the amount of incorrect or misleading statements made by council members of this issue has been gross. The voices of our community, including those most directly impacted, have been sidelined in favor of special interest groups. No one I know is against the work that these special interest groups are doing, and many of the projects we are happy to see succeed. Everyone supports volunteering and bringing the community together. What we don't like is the tactics and the entitled behaviors from these groups when people disagree with them. Please remember that there are more residents in this community than those in these groups that seem to be running the city. Many residents are afraid to become involved or speak up due to fear of retaliation. Confirmation of the retaliation is a veteran currently being threatened twice for voicing his opinion. We have seen other incidents of intimidation from people associated with these special interest groups, such as the senior resident who was given his opinion being yelled at to quote, "Move it if you don't like it, move." Unquoted by a 9 or 10-year-old child. And all the adults and parents started clapping and yelling out an agreement. Others have been labeled as racist and worse, all because a resident wanted our laws followed or because they simply didn't want murals in the residential area. Since the government and these nonprofits are so intertwined, I want to know if you think fear and intimidation is an acceptable way to govern. I have a couple questions. Councilman said alcohol would be limited to the gazebo. It doesn't say that in the ordinance, so is that true? He said that you could only have a small amount of alcohol. It doesn't say that in the ordinance. Is that true? He said you couldn't bring your alcohol in from Speedway or the cidery. Does this ordinance specify where you can or cannot buy your alcohol from if you have a permit? Mr. Graber said he would not give a permit to people unless it's a family-friendly event. Is that legal? Could the city get sued over denying a permit? Who picks and chooses who is allowed to have a permit for an event? How is bourbon tasting, which started this conference hearing, a family-friendly event? Lastly, a councilman reported that Mr. Bentz stated a previous ordinance was passed to prevent, and I'm repeating the word prevent, the park from being a playground, a place where kids are allowed to play. This is an outright offensive untruth, and Mr. Bentz deserves an apology. Thank you.
Thank you. The next request to address council is Marilyn Hannerhan.
Hello. I'm obviously here for the veterans. It's deeply troubling to see one of our distinguished veterans facing threats simply for expressing opposition to alcohol in Victory Memorial Park. This veteran received 2 separate phone calls threatening him. This kind of intimidation speaks volumes about those advocating for this change. Fortunately, I know this veteran, and he does not get intimidated. However, this is the reason many people are afraid to get involved and speak up. Threatening anyone, especially someone who has served their country or may be vulnerable due to disability or age, is absolutely despicable. It's a cowardly act that goes against every principle of decency. We find ourselves embroiled in a contentious debate where emotions are running high and tempers are flaring on both sides of the issue. However, in the center of this chaos, there stands a beacon of composure and respect, and that has been our veterans. They have remained steadfast in their demeanor, exhibiting a level of dignity and restraint that deserves our recognition. They know the true cost of conflict, having faced its horrors firsthand. They understand the gravity of sending loved ones off to the horrors of war. There exists a bond between these veterans and the families who have felt the anguish and separation of loss. It's a bond forged in sacrifice, cemented by the shared experiences of hardship and grief. For them, the significance of memorial, like the wall and the park itself, goes beyond mere symbolism. It's a solemn reminder of the sacrifices made by their comrades in arms, by their loved ones, by their brothers and sisters in the service. With that said, I do want to thank the volunteers currently cleaning the parks, and I want to say that volunteering to clean parks is a tradition that has been upheld for decades by many residents before them, and many of them are sitting right behind me tonight. Long before social media, countless individuals quietly dedicated their time to better our neighborhoods. They painted, cleaned, and cared for our neighborhoods and parks. The veterans have cleaned Victory Memorial Park, planted, mulched, maintained it for decades, with much of the cost coming from their own pockets. No one has the right to insinuate that they have not contributed to this park and are not currently doing so. And that was pretty much said at the last parks meeting by a resident. The effort of previous volunteers and our veterans, though often unseen, are no less impactful than those doing the work today. Victory Memorial Park has been a part of this city for a century. There is one park sign indicating it's one park. It is not two separate parks. For many decades, there have been recreational equipment and a pool on the grounds of Victory Memorial Park, and the veterans have welcomed families and family events on the grounds. Many are making the argument that the veterans don't want the grounds used, which is absolutely untrue. It has been stated that there have been lots of successful events happening at that park. I'm really glad to hear that. But what I don't understand is the obsessive need for alcohol in this park, unless there are future plans in the work that we don't know about. This is not about alcohol, but rather our veterans and their wishes. What we don't want is to watch our veterans and their families pushed to the sidelines of history, disrespected, brushed off, marginalized, or overlooked. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. The next request to address council is Lynn Roberts.
Hello, my name is Lynn Roberts, and I am here to voice my opposition to allowing alcohol at permitted events at Victory Memorial Park. The stance of veterans and citizens who oppose alcohol in Victory Memorial Park has been misrepresented on many occasions by several council members and community members who have spoken in favor of changing the ordinance. This is a matter of record. During the February 13th regular council meeting, Mr. Gerton referred to our veterans as a special interest group and stated that he campaigned on the promise that he would not allow a special interest group to have authority over Norwood. Ironically, Mr. Gerton is married to a board member of Norwood Together, a special interest group that has quite a bit of authority over Norwood. Of particular interest, Norwood Together obtained a grant in 2021 to, according to Mary Miller, president of Norwood Together, accelerate bringing Northwood Cidery Company to Norwood. According to information on Norwood Together's website, Emily Franson is a community partner of this special interest group, as are several of the citizens who have spoken in favor of changing the ordinance. I would venture to say that the majority of council members are members of Norwood Together. Whether one sees its influence as positive, negative, or a combination of the two, Norwood Together's authority over Norwood is apparent. In the April 9th council meeting, Mrs. Winterbauer stated that daily traffic needed to be increased to help eliminate the undesirable activity in Victory Memorial Park. Undesirable activity, I might add, that seems to have been overblown given the report by Lieutenant Steve Thomas of the NPD with only 28 runs that generated paperwork over the past 2 years. According to information relayed by Emily Franson on April 15th regarding her community survey, what is truly needed is improvements to the park, such as new and safe play equipment, access to restrooms, etc. Nothing was relayed by Ms. Franson that those surveyed stated permitting alcohol would make the park a more desirable destination. Ms. Franson has stated that she doesn't understand the opposition to allowing alcohol in Victory Memorial Park. We who oppose it don't understand why there's so much effort being put in by council to push for alcohol at this particular park. Yes, we know it's in the center of the city, but alcohol is permitted in every other park, and all the other parks do not have the designation of being a memorial. Ms. Bowling stated that Ohio liquor laws prohibited Northwood Cider Company from acquiring a permit to operate in Victory Memorial Park. The permit would have to be requested by a nonprofit, according to Mrs. Winterbauer. Given their close relationship, could Norwood together be the nonprofit entity to request and receive a permit for the cidery to sell at Victory Memorial Park? In fact, Northwood Cidery Company will be in Hunter Park on May 11th at an event publicized on Norwood Together's Facebook page. Because Mrs. Winterbauer is an employee of Northwood Cider Company, and Ms. Franson and Mr. Gerton have business relationships with Northwood Cider Company, I reiterate that a conflict of interest that would preclude them from voting on this issue may exist. Our veterans and those of us who support them have no problem with events being held at Victory Memorial Park. We want to see the park enjoyed by citizens. We ask only that you respect the wishes of our veterans who are members of a marginalized population and protected class, and keep Victory Memorial Park alcohol free. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Mr. President,
Mrs. Winterbauer.
I just want to state on the record that Emily's Garden is using our non-alcoholic cider.
Thank you. The next request to address council is Meg Albers.
Hi, I'm Meg Albers. I live at 1810 Hopkins Avenue. I'm here to support our veterans and the Victory Memorial Park. I've heard and been told that the city cannot give a small group of people control of public property, nor can it allow a small group to dictate what happens in city-owned public spaces. Yet I've observed instances where individuals or groups seem to have control over certain public areas. For example, Ms. Sickinger oversees the community garden on the corner of Williams and Ellesmere. There's another individual managing the micro park on Floral, and previously the city allowed a private group to cultivate a garden at Millcrest Park for their restaurant. Residents haven't raised concerns about these instances in the past. However, when it comes to Victory Memorial Park, the community wants their input heard. I am puzzled by this apparent discrepancy. How is it that control over other public properties has been granted to specific individuals or groups, yet the basic wishes of maintaining the status quo of no alcohol in the entire park is controversial? Our veterans, to whom the park was dedicated over 100 years ago, are not being respected. I would also like to know if I'm going to be able to get a permit for an event at the community garden to serve alcohol. I think it would be a darling place to hold a baby or wedding shower. It's a lovely park that is obviously family friendly. If alcohol permits are acceptable at our war memorial, I would think you would have no problem adding the community garden on the list for alcohol permits as well. In recent discussions surrounding diversity, equity, inclusion, I've witnessed a clear inconsistency also. While we tout our support for these principles, it pains me to see the disregard shown towards a group that should be among the most revered in our society, our veterans. Let us not forget that the vast majority of veterans are indeed considered a protected class. Yet in our debate, it seems their voices are often dismissed as inconsequential. Imagine, if you will, a scenario where a park dedicated to an African American heritage or Hispanic culture faced a similar threat to its sanctity. Would we not heed the wishes of these communities, respecting their desire to preserve the integrity of their entire sacred spaces? To do otherwise would be labeled as racist or discriminatory. Likewise, if the LGBTQ or Muslim communities raised objections, would we dare ignore their voices? We must recognize that the principles of DEI extend to all groups, including our veterans. Instead of bowing to controversial ones, let us invest in initiatives that enhance its family-friendly appeal. Alcohol is not the answer, and it never has been. Thank you.
Thank you. The next request to address council is Sarah Doherty.
Hello. So I guess I can also say that I am here representing veterans because on the public forum, there are veterans that say they want to drink in Victory Park. It's both sides. There's a lot more people out there in Norwood that support this ordinance than the people that are sitting behind me. So I'm here representing them and to talk about some things. I am a former employee of the Norwood Recreation. They're the people that decide who get to get park permits. I worked there and the parks got booked and reserved constantly. There's more need in the city for families to gather and host events. Victory was never an option because everyone forgot about it. No one knows that it's there. No one realizes it. And so I appreciate council and the director of the rec for coming forward and saying, let's use this space. The pool's not there anymore. It's just sitting there. It's being abused. Let's activate the park. So by allowing it to be on the list of parks that are reservable for a fee, you get a permit, and that permit allows you to host an event. There are limits per the permit when you go to the rec to sign up for an event space. You have to follow what you sign on the event application. There's a fee, they take your ID, we note who is going to be there, what the function is, and yes, at all these other parks in the city, you can have alcohol. Why does that make it bad? It doesn't. I go to the parks frequently. I am at Lower Millcrest twice a week, sometimes more, because I coach soccer. Love my girls, love being down there. Do I see the shenanigans that happen at Victory? No, because families are there constantly. We are having events there constantly. Soccer games, birthday parties, baby showers, wedding showers, what have you. But majority of that space is dedicated to playgrounds and soccer fields. We need a green space to be able to have events for the city. Norwood Day is no more at Coney Island. We need a space to be able to have it. And over, people have come and said, well, why not have it at Victory Park? Why not have it at Victory Park? Alcohol is a huge factor in fundraising. It is. The percentage and the facts are there. We've never sold alcohol at Norwood Day. It was always provided at Coney Island. Is Coney Island family friendly? They sell alcohol. Is Kings Island family friendly? They sell alcohol. Thank you. Victory Park is a park with a memorial in it. There is much more to that space than just the memorial. There's ample green space, playground equipment that needs to be updated. Yes, I agree with all that. I want to be able to go there and have an event, a birthday party. I have a nephew who has a birthday in June. I would love to use Victory and be able to have a family barbecue, crack open a brewski, and enjoy myself. I don't understand why that makes me a bad person, why that makes me offending veterans and dishonoring. My grandpa could slam beers like nobody else. He's a veteran. He would enjoy drinking in the park. I support council and your decision to pass this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to requests to address council, there were 3 requests that were submitted in writing.
Dear City Council members and Mayor Schneider, my husband and I moved to the corner of Regent and Hudson at 2101 Hudson Avenue in January of 20. Oops, sorry. I'll start over. Dear City Council members and Mayor Schneider, my husband and I moved to the corner of Regent and Hudson, 2101 Hudson Avenue in January of 2023 and are happy and grateful to be a part of the Norwood community. However, I am reaching out again. Previously reached out to select members of City Council this fall. Thank you for your response then. Regarding concerns for the amount of noise, partying, and littering that occurs outside of our house on a weekly basis, I believe largely from Xavier students. Every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night, typically from midnight to 2:30 or so, we have groups of students walking home and yelling outside of our windows. Sometimes there are parties that go late. Often it's just groups walking and yelling on the way home. And very frequently, I'd say at least once, but up to 3 times a week, there are people running and yelling past the radar speed signs on Regent to see who can run the fastest. It is incredibly disruptive to our sleep. I'm embarrassed to have guests spend the night. I know the person who previously lived at this house. We both work at Cincinnati Children's Hospital, and she said she moved because she didn't want to raise her kids near all the parties / night noise. I have called the non-emergency police line to report this, but it is not productive because the groups are generally transient, maybe only 5 minutes at a time, though ongoing throughout those hours. Recently at 3 a.m., I actually politely asked some young women to stop screaming and dribbling a basketball outside our windows, and one swore and yelled at me. She was clearly drunk and also drinking on the sidewalk. I appreciate the radar signs because they do help remind me if I'm approaching 25 miles an hour. However, I know most people who speed seem to speed past them anyways, and the students just really love screaming, yelling, and racing by them every night. Could these speed radar signs please activate only when someone is going 20 miles an hour or faster? I imagine this has to be a feasible and virtually free solution to stop the 3 times a week noise ordinance violations. Unfortunately, I don't think we're able to attend the next several city council meetings, but I believe starting in June we'll have more availability to join, listen, and hopefully learn more ways to get involved. I really do love Norwood, but I don't know how I'll be able to raise our family here when there's drunken yelling outside our window multiple times per week. I appreciate Ms. Hoover's response to my previous email about this, thank you, but I am wondering if there has been any recent action to help address this, or if there could be. Thank you all for any help or suggestions. Sincerely, Francis Albanese and AJ Smith. Sorry about that. Can you hear this? Can you hear this? Yep. Good evening. My name is Stephanie Downs. I am a Norwood resident. I'm grateful to live in Norwood for the past 27 years. I am invested in this community. As I watch and review the conversations and meetings regarding the changes that Council proposes at Victory Memorial Park, there are a couple things that I lean into that inform my decision making. First, as a Christian, I always ask, what does Scripture say? There is a time in the Bible where the religious zealots were peppering, I believe it's supposed to be Jesus, with questions, and one asked, "Teacher, which commandment is the greatest in the law?" Jesus declared, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind." This is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. It's a simple answer for me and for believers. The other thought that I would think about is mediation. I am certified as mediator by the Supreme Court State of Ohio. To be eligible for mediation, both parties not only need to agree to mediation, but they need to be in a place where they are able to handle mediation. Sadly, I would say I would not qualify either side for mediation at this point in the process. Here is what I saw at the last council meeting. 1, I observed one community member berate the council while speaking to them. 2, I observed at least 2 of the council members speak on the subject at length without showing or sharing any empathy or understanding of the concerns on the community side. Both berating and lack of ability to show empathy and understanding disqualify you for mediation. This is discouraging. Concerns about listening, learning, treating one another with dignity are of utmost importance. A vote seems preemptive when we have yet to hear and understand one another. Respectfully, Stephanie Downs. My name is Polly Burrows. I love and admire Norwood, the gem of the Highlands, and have many friends and relatives who live here. I have been involved with Woven Oak and with Baby Bear, a group that seeks to help meet the needs of Norwood's preschool children and their families as they raise them to become good citizens. I have been very favorably impressed by the community's support for the children. I have seen the brokenness that happens in families and in communities where increased public alcohol consumption is favored and encouraged rather than being limited by good city government regulations. As adults, we have the responsibility of providing positive role models for children of all ages. Studies have shown that children's and adolescents' perception of what is normal in alcohol use is influenced to the degree that they witness adults they admire using alcohol in a casual way. When it is seen as a normal, positive, and desirable thing, that is the expectation they will have of their own use of alcohol, especially if they see their parents and other influential adults willing to spend money on it and behaving as though it is a fun treat. Witnessing this adult attitude normalizes the use of alcohol in their young minds, and children and adolescents' natural curiosity and inability to make mature decisions and their normal desire to imitate adults can lead them to have lower perceptions of the actual risks involved, lower personal disapproval of use, and increased likelihood of harmful underage drinking. Adolescent alcohol use has been linked with a multitude of problems and is a predictor of problematic alcohol use in adulthood. So pursuing early prevention efforts in the community is vital. While consumption of alcohol does not often begin until early adolescence, even very young children are highly capable of internalizing and normalizing information through what they observe. Research has demonstrated that what is important is not whether or how much adults, and especially parents, drink in general, but rather whether they drink in the presence of children. As adults, we need to carefully consider what we are teaching and modeling about alcohol use in the presence of children. Exposure to adults who are consuming alcohol can and does shape children's and adolescents' ideas and values, which are crucial for regulating their future drinking behavior. A park should be a safe place for children to play and for families to have family-friendly recreation, which is highly desirable for the community, without having to worry about children or adolescents being swayed to the idea that drinking alcohol is something that they want to be involved in because it appears to them to be normal, harmless, everyday behavior that adults engage in. Alcohol is a psychoactive substance with dependence-producing properties. Reducing the harmful use of alcohol and its associated health and social burden is a public health priority. The harmful use of alcohol causes a high burden of disease and has significant social and economic consequences. Alcohol consumption is a causative factor in more than 200 diseases, injuries, and other health conditions. Drinking alcohol is associated with the risk of developing health problems such as mental and behavioral disorders, including alcohol dependence, and major non-communicable diseases such as liver cirrhosis, some cancers, and cardiovascular diseases. The harmful use of alcohol can also result in harm to other people, such as family members, friends, coworkers, and strangers. A significant proportion of the disease burden attributable to alcohol consumption arises from unintentional and intentional injuries, including those due to road traffic crashes, violence, and suicide. Fatal alcohol-related injuries tend to occur in relatively younger age groups. Are these the things the community wants to promote or to prevent? When the community works together effectively, the negative health and social consequences of alcohol can be reduced for children and adolescents in their future lives. There are plenty of adults-only places in the community where adults can partake of alcoholic beverages without exposing children and adolescents to the harmful influence of being exposed to adult drinking. Again, it is important to note that this influence exists, not in relation to whether or how much the adults drink, but whether they do so in the presence of impressionable children. As adults, we also need to question whether it is healthy for us to feel that we aren't able to enjoy ourselves without drinking alcohol, especially in the presence of vulnerable children and adolescents. Can we have enough mature self-control to choose to make this important decision for the sake of our children? Furthermore, can we teach them that a Veterans Memorial is a place to be respected in honor of those who have given so much for the cause of freedom?
There's like one left.
I think you will agree this is a wholesome and positive thing to promote, which will add to the dignity and high regard that people will attribute to Norwood. I urge you to consider all this carefully and to vote no on this decision. Respectfully, Polly Burrows.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, we have reports of standing committees of council. The first is infrastructure, streets, parks, recreation, and public places.
Thank you, Mr. President. To the Honorable Council of the City of Norwood, Ohio, we, your Committee of Infrastructure, Streets, Parks, Recreation, and Public Places, to whom was referred Victory Park Community Discussion, beg leave to submit the following report. Susan Daniels presented about the history of the park. Norwood Police relayed the difficulties surrounding the safety and drug issues in the park. Ms. Franzen presented a brief summary of the park survey, and attendees submitted ideas for the park in the future. Respectfully submitted, Miss Emily Franzen, Chairperson, Mrs. Sam Bowling, Miss Alexis Royce, and Mrs. Candace Winterbauer.
Thank you. Mrs. Winterbauer.
Motion to accept the committee report?
Motion by Mrs. Winterbauer to accept the report. Mrs. Hoover.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mrs. Hoover. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Gerton?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Next item is a Law, Ordinance, Human Resource, and Compliance Committee report.
To the Honorable Council of the City of Norwood, Ohio, we, your Committee of Law, Ordinance, Human Resource, and Compliance, to whom was referred the cost of chicken permits and lighting ordinances, beg leave to submit the following report. The committee decided to lower cost of chicken inspection and permits to a one-time fee of $25, and Dana Bowles showed the committee a presentation on commercial lighting in Norwood. Respectfully submitted, Ms. Alexis Royce, Chairperson, Mrs. Sam Bowling, Mr. Jeff Gerton, and Mrs. Susan Hoover.
Thank you. Mrs. Winterbauer.
I move to accept the committee report?
Motion by Mrs. Winterbauer to accept the report. Mrs. Bowling.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mrs. Bowling. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Gerton?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Next item on Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Appreciate that. I don't mean to jump the gun, but I would like to, I'd like to make a motion to shelf this K1 tonight, and I would ask that anyone at this body to second that motion, please, to an indefinite time, and allow us as a body to stand with our veterans here tonight and our citizens, and to stand with the ones that paid the ultimate price for this community, and they're on that memorial. And I would ask that someone second that with me. Thank you.
Motion on the floor by Mr. Braden is to table the Victory Park ordinance to a time uncertain. Is there a second? With no second to the motion, that motion fails. We currently, for third reading of ordinances and resolutions, is an ordinance amending Chapter 561 of the Norwood Codified Ordinances entitled Parks and Playgrounds to expand and clarify alcohol permits and to modify Victory Park's status. Mrs. Franzen.
I move we have the third reading.
Motion by Mrs. Franzen to have the third reading of the ordinance. Mr. Gerton.
I'll second the motion.
Seconded by Mr. Gerton. Is there any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Gerton?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
No, ma'am.
With all members present voting, that is 6 yes, 1 against, the motion carries. Please have the third reading of the ordinance.
An ordinance amending Chapter 561 of the Norwood Codified Ordinances entitled Parks and Playgrounds to expand and clarify alcohol permits and to modify Victory Park's status.
Thank you. Mr. Garten.
I make a motion, we pass the ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Garten to pass the ordinance. Is there a second?
And
Mrs. Franzen.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mrs. Franzen. Any discussion?
Let's have a discussion.
Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ms. Franson, you don't have to second if you're unsure of yourself. You don't have to second that. I mean, I appreciate, you don't have to second because it's a motion. I think I just proved that. I just think it's a sad day that we got 7 people here that don't want to respect the people that pay the ultimate price for us to sit here in our community. I try not to make it personal, and I try to keep, I just really think it's a sad day. I hope that you guys have a change of heart and someone votes no, and we really stand with the people that count the most for us, that's been there for us. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. Garten.
I would ask the president to not allow members of council to disparage other members of council.
If
I may disagree with people in this room, but I am not here to disparage veterans.
Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you. I tried to be as polite as I could. I merely suggested.
Excuse
Mrs. Bowling.
I just want to say before we get to the vote, I'll give everybody a minute.
Did any of you serve? Did any of you serve in the military?
I agree with her.
Did you? Vote them out. Not one. Not one.
I'll
Mrs.
continue.
Bowling.
Thank you. I would just like to state, this concept of the decision having already been made, everyone having made up their mind, that's been kind of repeated throughout this conversation. I would just like to state for the record that every conversation that I've had with anyone else on council, no one has been decided. No one has had their mind made up. Everyone has had conflicting feelings about it. And I think that it's a disservice to paint this picture of everyone on council as these single-minded people who have already made up their minds and aren't listening to anyone. I can only speak for myself, but I make an active effort to hear everyone who comes to speak, to be respectful, to listen to what they're saying, and to take it under consideration. I think we can all agree that no one who's sitting on council is currently a career politician who is being lobbied to by anyone. Everyone who's on council is a community member who wants Norwood to be fantastic. And I think that we could all use a reminder that even if we have different ideas of how to get there, we're all on the same team and we all have the same goal. And I think that disagreeing about how to reach that goal is fine. What I've seen behavior-wise in terms of the disrespect shown to each other, the threats, the mocking people's personal appearance is embarrassing and makes me ashamed of a community that I'm typically so proud to be a part of. I moved to Norwood because of the sense of community, and I have not seen that represented during this conversation. And I think that these antics have really taken away from the issue at the core of this discussion and have distracted and kind of made a little bit of a mockery of what we're doing and the work that we're trying to do and the work that the veterans are trying to do. I think it's really detracting from the issue at large. And it's been very challenging for me to try to separate my feelings personally versus what I think could serve the community best, which is, I think, my job as a council person to determine what will serve the community best to the best of my ability, and to detract, to separate, I apologize, the antics that are happening on social media and that are happening surrounding this conversation from how I feel and what I think could serve the community best. That's been very difficult. And so I do kind of resent this idea that we have just ignored everyone and have our minds made up, because that's not been what I've seen to be the case. All that being said, my decision has been very hard for me to come to because I feel quite a bit of conflict about this issue. And I think that this has drawn a lot of attention to Victory Park. I'm thrilled that there's so much passion regarding our civic spaces and regarding this park. And I expect that that passion will carry over into improvements and activations in that park. And I hope that it does not end with this conversation surrounding alcohol. I hope that the community concerns are surrounding the park and the memorial and how to make best use of that space, and not solely about this one small issue. It's just very important to me that we zoom out of this issue. I don't know that having alcohol in the parks is going to solve a need that the community has right now, that having alcohol in Victory Park, considering the amount of permits that we're receiving for that park right now, there are not people submitting permits for small events there, for birthday parties, for baby showers, because it's an undesirable location for people to host events right now. And I think that's the bigger issue. Yeah, so I feel like it is embarrassing to me, the behavior that I've seen surrounding this conversation, and I am mourning the loss of a time where we could disagree about issues and still speak to each other civilly and like adults and bring our opinions to the table without cutting each other down and being disrespectful and being attacking.
Thank you. Mrs. Hoover.
I actually, Mrs. Bowling and I were chatting last night. I'm also very conflicted on this. I'm also really kind of, part of me is heartbroken and part of me is really angry. When we're making this an issue of respect, my biological father was Presidential Guard Marine under Ford. Daughter of my heart, woman who is like a daughter to me, is a retired Marine. I have friends, including friends of my sons, who are actively serving. Kids that I coach in baseball, in soccer, my husband coached in baseball, are serving. I don't know how many people know, I'm a mental health therapist. I have led support groups for vets with cancer at the VA. I have quite literally sat at the deathbed of countless men and women who have served, who are dying. So when people say you don't have respect, I have a giant problem with that. I feel like it is deeply inaccurate. I feel like it's totally untrue. My job is to listen to all of the voices. And what's interesting to me is I have heard lots of different voices. I have heard from active vets who live in Norwood, who are against the ordinance. I've heard from vets who are for the ordinance, against the ordinance, active military. I've talked with the bulk of the people, didn't really have a preference and were more surprised that it was such a divisive issue. Honestly, that's the bulk of the people that I have talked with. There's certainly a very loud, angry, passionate group. I am so hurt that Mr. Bentz has received threats. I can also say that I think everyone on council has been a victim of nastiness. We're neighbors. I've been in Norwood for 25 years. I've raised my 3 children here. But apparently to some, that's not long enough. I'm not sure what long enough is to be vested in the community. I can tell you I deeply care about Norwood. I care about all Norwood. I'm also very concerned about the lack of communication, the lack of understanding. It strikes me that a lot of people have left this room who should be here for this conversation. But I feel like people have wanted me to listen more than they have wanted to hear. They're not wanting to hear the truth. They're not wanting to hear what's really going on. I want to share one thing that's sort of been bothering me for a bit is regarding the 2021 ordinance, which says specifically, in recognition of their past contributions and in exchange for their continuing maintenance work, the City of Norwood shall not, without the prior consultation of the Victory Park Veterans Association and American Legion Post 123, remove, modify, or relocate any of the features or memorials erected in honor and remembrance of the armed forces, including the following features and the area immediately surrounding them. That's the Wall of Remembrance, the Pathway of Freedom, the POW MIA Memorial. We are not breaking this commitment. We have not changed this ordinance. Out of respect, I did reach out to Mr. Bentz. I also reached out to the American Legion. These conversations were happening. But these are conversations. We need to listen. We need to make the best use of the resources that we have. And that is our job as council members, to not be swayed. The other thing is the issue of ethics. People know that there has been a public records request. I am happy to do that. In my job as a mental health therapist, I have to do that as well. That's the price you pay. That doesn't mean that there aren't consequences. That doesn't mean that didn't take time out of my life. Again, that's the way that it goes. I was literally in the hospital. My father was in surgery for 2 hours pulling out public records requests. I have over 200 pages so far, and I'm not nearly done. It will be interesting once all those records are received and reviewed, if there will be a understanding that there was not some conspiracy with the Cidery and Norwood together. In terms of ethics, it was stated, if you go to the Ohio Ethics Commission, it clearly states public officials and employees violate the conflicts of interest provision of the Ohio ethics law when they take official action or make decisions in matters that definitely and directly affect themselves, their families, or their business associates. Definitely and directly. An example would be is if this ordinance were to say the Northwood Cidery is the exclusive alcohol distributor for this park. That is not what we are saying. Northwood Cidery has just as much right to pull a permit as any other business in the city. So there is no ethical issue in my understanding of the law. I could keep talking. I continue to be frustrated that this conversation has gotten so toxic and nasty, and is distracting from the other work that we are also actively trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Franzen.
I just want to speak briefly. Maybe not. Never mind. Go ahead.
Okay. Mr. Braden.
Please, thank you.
Mr. Gerton.
I just want to be clear that the ordinance states no alcohol is to be allowed in Victory Park unless there is a permit and maintained in the designated picnic areas. It says designated picnic areas because we have different parks, and it is just a common sense thing to keep the language of the ordinance clear. And so right now, the designated picnic area in Victory Park is the gazebo. It is approximately 600 square feet. There's an acre and a quarter of land, and we are limiting alcohol to stay within 600 square feet. If this was bigger than that, if this was some large event where we're going to have summer days, which there are people here that started summer days that are now against it. But if this was about summer days coming back to Victory Park, I would not be for this. I support this ordinance because it is about 600 square feet, a permit that is given by Mr. Gabbard or whoever else will be the future Parks Commissioner. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mr. President. You guys can sit here and you can talk for hours and hours, and you can tell us whatever you want to tell us. But no one believes that your minds aren't made up. No one believes it. So you could say it, but no one believes it. You could say how many people you've talked to that are for it, but where are they at? We've got one person in the audience tonight. Where are they at? I saw a crowd of people that left here that are telling you they don't want it, that you're not listening to, that I believe that there's going to be a 6-1 vote tonight. So, and that's fine. It's your right to do. You guys deserve that. But when you tell us that your mind's not made up, and you tell us that you've waited and you've been on the fence, no one believes that. No one believes it. So I'm just relaying the facts, and I don't see the evidence that people are for it. You can tell us that. So, I guess I'll finalize this. My last thing of a yes vote on this is a flat out spit in the face to our veterans here in Norwood. So you're capable. You can do it. You have that right. But why would you? Why would you? Unless you have interest in this. So I'm disappointed. Thank you.
Mrs. Hoover.
I would say that my interest is in making the park the best it can be. My interest is that the city be kinder, more thoughtful, ask questions more than speak. I don't know how to convince someone of what's in my head. I honestly thought about seconding your motion.
I would appreciate that.
I honestly, to this moment, I'm still deciding. And I realize that and part of that is because my concern at this point, I'll say this way. I believe the ordinance is good and appropriate. If I vote no, it is not because of the ordinance, but it's because of the spectacle around it has gotten so unpleasant that I have a concern that that is the narrative that will continue to drive this rather than what do we really want to see in the park. I was excited when we had the community conversation last week that people did put lots of ideas up. And there were a lot of overlapping ideas. And I'm excited to continue that conversation. I think one of my thoughts would be to have this conversation continue with a bigger conversation of the park. I believe I said that way back, that I think if we had folded this into a full conversation about do we want the park to look like, I don't think it would have done this. And that's sort of where I'm continuing to sit.
I'd like to respond, Mr. President.
Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would hope, Ms. Hoover, that you would vote no because of the crowd of residents that vote for us that were here, the majority that are saying no, they don't want it at Victory, versus no one that I see except one person that are saying they would like it. So I would hope that our no vote would tend to be because our residents don't want us to do it. So, versus what we want. But that's just me. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Bowling.
A few things, a few points. I don't think that I've ever behaved, at least in my professional life and on council, in any way that would deem me untrustworthy. So if people don't believe the things that I'm saying, that is not on my shoulders. I have not ever behaved in an untrustworthy way. I have not misrepresented myself or my stance on issues. So if people are not convinced that the things that I'm saying are true, that's fine, because I'm not here to convince people. I'm here to speak what I believe to be the case. I'm not a politician. Again, I'm just a member of the community who's doing my best to represent my community. And so if people don't want to take me at my word, that's okay. That's their prerogative. They have a right to do that. And there is so much going on in this city that there is only so much time and energy that we can dedicate towards convincing people to see things from a certain perspective. And the beauty of democracy and the beauty of a diverse community is that we don't all see things from the same perspective. I don't want us to all agree on everything. That would be so boring. I don't want to live in a town like that. I want diverse perspectives. I want diverse opinions. And I don't want us to spend all of our time and energy trying to convince people to see something exactly our way. I have not served in the military, so I don't have the lived experiences that veterans who have come to speak to us have. My brother, which I have not mentioned this intentionally because I'm not trying to use it as a tool to manipulate the conversation, is currently an active member of the Air Force. My little baby brother, who's not even old enough to drink yet. So he has no stance on this, but I think that pivoting this as some sort of thing where we're disrespecting veterans is so short-sighted and is honestly somewhat of a lazy argument, because I have nothing but respect for veterans. I have mentioned that I come from a family of military members, and I think that this issue, certainly they offer valued perspective, and so do all the other members of our community. And I really just want to clarify and reiterate that my vote on this ordinance takes into account everyone who's come to speak, everyone who I've spoken to off the cameras, every person who's approached me and wanted to speak about this and give their opinion, every comment that people have left on social media. Unfortunately, all of the harassing that I've seen going, and I'm trying to keep that separate because I think it's inappropriate. My vote on this ordinance is based exclusively on, do I think that this ordinance fills an urgent and immediate need that addresses the issues that we are seeing at Victory Park right now? That is it. There are no secret interests. There are no lobbyists. There is no special interest group. No one from any organization has tried to sway my mind on this in any way. In fact, no one from any organization has really even spoken to me about this issue. The owners at Northwood Cidery have very intentionally not spoken to me about this issue because they do not want to have any sway in the conversation. And I think that the spread of misinformation is so frightening, that terrifies me, that we have this prolific spread of misinformation that people are, because they agree with it, taking it as fact. That is so scary to me, because that can snowball so rapidly into something dangerous. I've done everything that I can to hear everything that people have to say, and I don't feel that that is being reciprocated. And I'm happy to listen to anyone who wants to speak about it, and I encourage them to listen back.
Mrs. Hoover, you had your hand. All right, Ms. Royce.
I've been pretty quiet on this, so gotta put in my 2 cents. Common ground, Mr. Braden, I agree, we cannot make people believe us. As Mrs. Hoover said, there's nothing, if people don't want to believe what we say, that is fine. But I have no professional ties to the cidery, to Norwood Together. This is truly a vote on policy for me, and policy that I think will improve or won't improve. Frankly, I'm not going to hide the ball. I think this policy will help Victory Park. And and this could be my bubble, but I have spoken to a lot of people who who want this ordinance to pass, and they think it is good policy. Like everybody else on council, I have loved ones who are in the military. I don't think that's entirely relevant, but I have nothing but the utmost respect for veterans. I have friends who are in the Army actively now. And in fact, one of them lives in Norwood. Actually, he just left, and he supports this ordinance as well from my speak. But he didn't want to come to council and talk about it because he felt it would be manipulative to speak as an Army member about this ordinance. So I think this is certainly the loudest group. They are the loudest. They have showed up, and I respect that they have showed up for the 3 readings. Free speech, I appreciate their input. I really do. As Mrs. Bowling said, I listened. I took it into consideration. I have wavered on this. But at the end of the day, the policy I think is best is what I'm going to vote for. Because I think that is what I was elected to do. In addition to listening, which I have done. And I'm really sad it's gotten this far, which everyone else has said. I'm sorry to be so repetitive. But I just want to make that clear. I think for most people, this is a matter of policy and in no way reflects our feelings on veterans or the great service they have done to this country.
Mrs. Franzen.
I wasn't going to speak tonight because I've just been sorry. Trying to be respectful and an adult, but I never intended to introduce an ordinance that I thought would be disrespectful to veterans, or I just wanted to help Mr. Gabbard put on events at the parks wherever he wanted them to be. I don't feel that the nastiness that has been directed to me has been in any way proportional. I'm sorry. But I do want to apologize if I have offended anyone with what I said two council meetings ago. I was very tired because of having a child, not because I was tired of the conversation. Even though I introduced this, I also wavered because I honestly do listen to people. I'm sorry that I'm getting upset. I've been trying to not get upset this whole time. I just wanted to make that clear that I just wanted to introduce this ordinance because of Mr. Gabbard, and I do want to also clarify that I don't have a business interest in the cidery. One time I sold Candace $30 of honey, and she used it in a cider, and I guess that's my business interest. So, and I am a community partner with Norwood Together. What that means is I give them money every month. I give them $20 a month, which I guess makes them the whole, I don't know how ethically that pans out, but they don't fund me. None of them, no member of Norwood Together funded me in my campaign. I got 3 donations totaling $170. So sorry. I didn't want to get upset because I don't want people to not feel like they can't speak what they feel because they don't want someone to cry. That's always an awkward, uncomfortable thing. But that's my depth of feeling right now. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Bowling.
I'll keep this very short. I know I can go on and on. I also think that it is our responsibility to acknowledge that certainly many people were here speaking against the ordinance, but asking the question, where were people who are in support of the ordinance, is really disregarding people who are young families, who have children, who work second and third shift. There are very many reasons why people may not be able to attend meetings, and that doesn't mean that their opinions are not as relevant or as important. I think it's fantastic that people do show up and speak at meetings, but these meetings do not respect or do not represent the entirety of our community, and I think that's important to keep in mind.
Thank you. Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, they're not loud. They're our heroes. They're not loud, so whatever categories that is. And Mr. Gabbard, as far as to address Mr. Gabbard, he came here and he addressed us, and he said with his own words, he does not want it either for or against it. Right there, he said he only brought it up because he was, whatever, he was obligated to do it, but he literally told us he didn't care one way or another. He didn't have a stake in it. Thirdly, I'd like to make one more motion to table this issue, to give us one more shot. I would like to make a motion to table this issue indefinitely.
The current motion on the floor is to pass the ordinance. We already have a motion with the first and a second.
Thank you.
Mrs. Winterbauer.
Thank you, Mr. President. So the last week I've had to take out all the emotion. So I go to the facts, and yes, Norwood Together brought the cidery here, and I am now an employee that works in the city of Norwood, which I love this community, and I love that I can walk to work and walk my kids to and from school from work. But I see Victory Park and the memorial every day. And I'm just going to go off my last year and a half. When I started working there, I saw literally active drug deals in the parking lot, going to the gazebo, hiding their stuff in the bushes. And I'm gonna repeat this, the police do an amazing job. Public Works does a great job, but they cannot be at that park 24/7. So that's what I saw about a year and a half ago. Active drinking in the park. I'll spare you the bathroom situation. But that's what I saw a year and a half ago. And then when we have a market, there might be individuals having a hard time in the morning in the park because of drug use. The police say this repeatedly, residents need to be active. They can't be everywhere all the time. So you have people at the market seeing there's a problem, contacting the police. That's a benefit. You're bringing people to the park. Within that year and a half, I no longer see drug deals. They might be happening, but it's not as obvious. I continue to see drinking in the park. And if there is someone who looks like they're in trouble or overconsumed or just might need help, I do call the police. If they're just having a beer, the police usually do come, run them off. They're back a few hours later. I've seen the police make arrests for people being drunken in the memorial, in the park. They make that arrest, and usually those guys are back before probably the paperwork's done. Again, the police and Public Works does an amazing job, and what they have to clean up and do, I wouldn't want their job, but I'm very grateful for them. But it's gotten better because there's been events, and there's been volunteers actively trying to bring people to that area. The memorial was being disgraced when I first got there. And I mean, to this day, last week, middle of the day, a guy walking down the sidewalk just turns and starts urinating. Middle of the day. Unfortunately, the auxiliary officer pulled up immediately after he was done. But why is that okay? Because it's been happening for over a decade. And I love the passion about the park currently, but the memorial's been disrespected for over a decade. And I've only seen it a year and a half. I'm new. But with more events happening at the park in the last year, not even in the park, just on the street, it's gotten so much better. I've seen family having a picnic on a blanket in the park. I'll see, there's a guy who practices his golf swing, just putts around. The activity from a year and a half ago, and again, I'm going back to the facts and what I've seen, it's just gotten so much better. And that's what we need for this park, is a policy that can help support that foot traffic, those events. I do not want to see anyone drunk or even drinking in the memorial. It is a sacred space. I like to go there with my kids when there is an event, and we have conversations about the individuals that have served, why they served, why it's important to be respectful in that area. So to me, it's the continued use of that, and any way that we can support it with good policy will help reduce the current drunkenness, drug use, defecation, and urination that is currently going on. We can support, the city needs support in that endeavor. And again, police and Public Works are doing an amazing job, but it needs more help. So kind of going, that's my perspective. That's what I've witnessed in the last year and a half. I think this is a good policy that will still bring respect and peace to the memorial, which it deserves. And maybe even let's bring more to it. I would love to see some of the ideas that were brought up about a water feature for other veterans, anything like that. It's just been very frustrating for me because every day I go to work and I see it being disrespected. So these conversations have been hard with all the emotion. And yes, when we first had our parks meeting, I didn't think alcohol, to me, it was like, no. The second meeting, I was excited. All the people here, all the energy, I'm like, we're gonna have a good conversation, we're gonna have more connections. And yeah, alcohol might not be the solution. Maybe we don't need it. We have more people who are interested. Let's bring up some great ideas. And then a narrative got spun that was completely incorrect and very damaging. And it's been hard to balance that. I don't want to vote because of the hate and spite. I want to vote for veterans. I want to keep that memorial respected, but it's hard when I see it disrespected every day. So I think this is a good policy, and that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Current motion on the floor is to pass the ordinance. The motion by Mr. Garten, seconded by Mrs. Franzen. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Bowling?
No.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Garten?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
No.
All members present voting yes. That is 5 for and 2 against. The motion carries. Next item, introductory readings. We have an ordinance amending Section 505.15 of the Norwood Codified Ordinances entitled Prohibited Animals to modify the rules regarding keeping chickens and declaring an emergency as amended. Mrs. Bowling.
I move we suspend the rules and have all 3 readings.
Motion by Mrs. Bowling to suspend the rules and have all 3 readings. Mr. Garten.
A second.
Seconded by Mr. Garten. Any discussion? Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would allow Miss Royce to go first.
Wow.
Like,
Oh, I was just gonna. I cannot believe that, Joe. Sorry, I'm out of order. So I watched the meeting I missed on my last night of vacation and saw Mr. Garten's concerns about the cost of the permit, and none of us were married to the $150. It was just sort of a break-even figure we had come up with. So we lowered it to a one-time fee of $25 for the inspection and the permit, and that's it. And we added a waiver if you there's an assumption that you cannot make the fees if you receive any type of benefits from the state or federal government. And that's just to make sure it's cost effective for anyone who wants a chicken coop. So, and it's still 10 chickens. So, but that's the only change.
All right, Mr. Braden.
thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Ms. Royce. Appreciate that. I just want to commend Mr. Garten for heading like this. I appreciate that. I appreciate your motion last meeting. I appreciate it. As, so I stand with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Bowling.
I just wanted to clarify that the reason we're doing all 3 readings is because chicken season is nigh, and now is the time for chicks. So we just want to ensure that this is passed in time for folks to add their additional chicks if they should so choose.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Motion on the floor by Mrs. Bowling, seconded by Mr. Garten, is to suspend the rules and have all 3 readings of the ordinance. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Bowling?
Yeah. Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Garten?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Please have all 3 readings of the ordinance.
An ordinance amending Section 505.15 of the Norwood Codified Ordinances entitled Prohibited Animals to modify the rules regarding keeping chickens and declaring an emergency as amended. An ordinance amending Section 505.15 of the Norwood Codified Ordinances entitled Prohibited Animals to modify the rules regarding keeping chickens and declaring an emergency as amended. An ordinance amending Section 505.15 of the Norwood Codified Ordinances entitled Prohibited Animals to modify the rules regarding keeping chickens and declaring an emergency as amended.
Thank you. We have a motion to pass the ordinance. Mrs. Bowling,
I motion we pass the ordinance.
is there a second? Mrs. Royce.
I'll
Ms.
second.
Royce. All right, motion by Mrs. Bowling, seconded by Ms. Royce to pass the ordinance. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Garten?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Next item is an ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2024 and declaring an emergency. Mrs. Franzen.
I move we suspend the rules and have all three readings.
Motion by Mrs. Franzen to suspend the rules and have all three readings of the ordinance. Mrs. Winterbauer.
I second.
Seconded by Mrs. Winterbauer. Any discussion? Mrs. Winterbauer.
I want to see if Mr. Miracle had anything to say.
Mr. Miracle.
Thank you, Mr. President. This has been a lot of effort by a lot of people, and it's culminating tonight, so I ask for council to please pass this so that we can continue operating the city, move forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Yep.
All right. Motion on the floor by Mrs. Franzen, seconded by Mrs. Winterbauer, is to suspend the rules and have all three readings of the ordinance. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Girton?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Please have all three readings of the ordinance.
Ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2024 and declaring an emergency. Ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2024 and declaring an emergency. Ordinance to change appropriations for the year 2024 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Motion to pass the ordinance.
Motion by Mr. Braden to pass the ordinance. Is there a second? Mrs. Hoover.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mrs. Hoover. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Girton?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Moving on to administration reports. Mayor Schneider.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very interesting meeting so far. So I hope it is. I do appreciate all the discussion and time and effort that you guys have taken on some of these issues. I mean, the Victory Park issue is something that I think is of interest because I think there was a bit of an overreach on designating what is the park and what isn't the park. For me, I look at the safety lane building and they're saying all of a sudden, oh, this is part of Victory Park also. No alcohol, which ties the city's hands for potentially utilization of that building for some organization or multiple organizations. So I'm a little nervous about signing immediately what you guys just passed. I might veto it. I might come back with some changes that I think would make it better legislation.
But
Sorry. So I might veto what you guys just passed with this because I think there are some problems in there. I think there was a comment made that there's only 600 square feet where you can put alcohol. Well, that would hold everybody within that little gazebo. There's no way that's 600 square feet is the picnic area that would be designated. So I think there needs to be some discussion on that also, on what is a designated picnic area in that area. So this is not one, normally ordinances come across and I grab them right after the meeting and I go, yep, I agree and absolutely, let's move on. But I really want to look at that from my perspective, from the administration side perspective. Of course, people realize that as the mayor, I'm sitting here at these meetings, but I'm not a member of city council. The legislative part of the city is city council. The administrative part is what I'm here for. I'm here to listen. I'm here to learn. I want to understand everything that's going on at these council meetings. But it's not a participatory thing. You can see when they call the roll, they don't say, Mr. Mayor, and I get to say yes or no. I'm just really an observer when it comes to your city council meeting. But I do have, as a strong mayor form of government, I do have the ability to veto. So if there's something I look at and say, that doesn't hold true with what I think should happen, and then, of course, council can override a veto, but there's some interesting parts of that. And I'll be having some discussion with the administration, with the administrative team, and I'll be having discussions with some other people. I have a short period of time where I either veto or pass or let it go, but those are important parts. Because Victory Park is sort of I can't say, well, it might be the centerpiece. It's a centerpiece park for our community. And there's so much there, and there's so much potential there. We talked about over the last 10 years, how it's changed a little bit, what was going on. The city didn't have money to put into it, but if you look at it, there are outdoor shuffleboard sets there, areas there where it used to be shuffleboard. There used to be people like in Central Park where they would go there and play chess and checkers. You'd have somebody sitting there and you could walk by and the person would say, "Hey man, you want to play me in checkers?" And it was, so it was active at that time, but we haven't seen that in years and years. And I think what this council's trying to do is get it active again, like get people there utilizing it. And it's not just families, it's the vets. And we keep on saying family park, activated family park. It's adults. It's all of us. It's all of our community members that we're trying to activate it for, not just families. We're trying to activate them. And that's true in every park that we have in the city of Norwood. We want our parks to be great. And we want all of our community members to be there and to enjoy our parks. So there's some interesting part to that. I actually listed the way I was supposed to be going through some of these things, and I screwed up and went to that one first. But I also talked a little bit about the city council membership. I sat there for 3 terms for 6 years. It's interesting. As you look at what the legislative body and what you're doing, it's are you putting together procedures? That word was mentioned, it's operational procedures for the city. I don't know that you're putting together operational procedures. You're making decisions on that, but how it's administered has to come from somewhere. And what Noah and I, the safety service director, are going to have to look at and say, okay, now they passed this ordinance. What is the picnic area? What encompasses the picnic area there? Because we didn't have what I call the Norwood's front lawn. We had a big swimming pool shell that was there with chain link fence that was all rusty and looking terrible. And we removed that and we made this great green space. And we made reference to the great green space that we have. I called it Norwood's lawn because I thought, man, this is just incredible. And we've had incredible events, Shakespeare in the Park, and we've had movies, and we had the Jurassic Park movie with dinosaurs there and all that stuff. Those are the events we should have. I don't know how much that the involvement there is hinged upon having alcohol in that park. And then, I look at it and say, well, could you have alcohol in certain sections of the park for civic held events, for big events, but not for private events? So we always rent the pool. Every time one of my kids would graduate from high school or even college, we would rent Fenwick Park. And it was a great park because you could have a cooler full of beer and adults could imbibe and have, so that was great. But is it really critically important to have that type of party at Victory Park? I'm not sure that I agree or disagree on some of this. So I've got some work to do and some thought to put into whether I just sign this and we move forward, or whether I come back to council and say, here's some of the reasons why I feel it should be done a little bit differently, or maybe we can bring the two sides together. And that's something, bring everybody together and be reasonable and say, this is a reasonable accommodation where we meet both sides of it. So important part. The second part is or the other part of my administrative report is each of you received a letter. As I came in, I dropped off a letter, and since we're reading letters, I think this is a letter that we can read. I will read myself, so Natalie, you can relax. She's like, phew. But this has to do with Elm Avenue. So this letter went out recently to community members around that area, around where the Elm Avenue flooding occurs and has been occurring for years and years and years. And after this letter, a letter went out from the safety service director talking about a meeting that is going to be held to bring in some of the individuals that could be part of the solution to this. So, friends and neighbors, this went out April 17th or 18th. It was hand delivered to community members in that area. 2 decades ago, during my tenure with the city of Norwood, the persistent issue of stormwater flooding in the Elm Avenue area demanded our attention. Investigating the root cause, we traced the flow from numerous catch basins extending all the way back to the YMCA building. At that time, it was a YMCA building. Now it's the Norwood Recreation. But you can see the area, the size of the area that it was pulling water from, which compounded the problem. Despite diligent maintenance efforts by the Public Works team, heavy rainfall events continued to overwhelm the system, resulting in localized flooding. And that continues to this day. In the early 2000s, we embarked on a journey to find viable solutions. Progress was made, but challenges persisted. Chief among them, securing the necessary funding to implement effective measures. Though my time in office ended in 2003, the quest for resolution endured through years of discussions and aspirations, hindered only by the elusive combination of a workable solution and financial backing. That was a key part. All those years, you think about all those years we had, and it was still an open issue, but the administration we just didn't have the wherewithal. We didn't have the money, the funds to do it. Today, I'm pleased to announce that we stand on the brink of a transformation with the meticulously designed solution and the crucial backing of funding. The long-awaited improvement for our neighborhood is within reach. We have to take advantage of the funding. This is the funding, a major portion of this funding is coming from Hamilton County. The Hamilton County Commissioners had it on their docket. They brought it forward on their agenda, and we're really close. Yet, this endeavor cannot succeed without the collective effort of our community. Council members, including all the community members this city's ability to leverage these funds hinges on your support and active participation. Together, we possess the power to eradicate this long-standing issue and usher in a new era of resilience for our neighborhood. In the coming days, you can expect communication from the Safety Service Director, I mentioned Noah Powers, outlining details, extending invitations to meetings, and initiating discussions with community members. Your attention to these communications is vital as we embark on this journey together. We are on a journey together to make this major improvement within our community. Thank you for lending your ear and your commitment to advancing this crucial improvement. Together, let us pave a way for a brighter, flood-free future for our beloved community. Is this going to solve every, stormwater flooding problem within the city of Norwood? No, but it is going to, hopefully, as we move forward, it's going to eradicate one that has plagued an Elm Avenue area for years and years and years. So many sleepless nights for people living over there. We've seen it multiple times come up through the election process. A storm comes through and they say, we got to do something. We've got to do something. We are in a pretty good place right now, or a pretty good position right now to move forward, but it is going to take a lot of support from council, a lot of support from community members all over the city of Norwood, and then a lot of time and effort from our Safety Service Director and from our Superintendent of Public Works to implement this. There's some plans that are going to be unveiled. I think there's a meeting on May 2nd that is going to happen at the Community Center, which will bring those people together, and hopefully we can move forward and eliminate this challenge. So, it's been a long time coming. And I think we're closer now than we were, back in early 2000. And I think that within the next year or 2 years, we can have this thing fixed. So that's all I have for an administrative report. Since we're reading letters, I might as well read it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes,
Sorry.
Ms. Royce.
Mr. Mayor, do you have a time for the May 2nd meeting?
It is at the community center. Is that a Saturday morning? I don't have a time for it.
I can wait if it's going to be announced later.
Yeah, May 2nd is Thursday.
6? Okay.
Thursday at 6 p.m. This letter will go up, if it has not already been posted on the website, we'll post it up on the website. And then that meeting. Now, that meeting is specifically, the invitations for that meeting are going out to the affected people in that area. That's not like we expect everybody in the city of Norwood to try to come to that meeting. But it's going to take, the first effort is really going to take getting people who have had a lot of sleepless nights and had a lot of floods in their front yards to that meeting to talk about the path forward.
Thank you. Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mr. President. So exciting news for somebody who has been watching that area since I was a child. I grew up a block and a half away from Elm Avenue on Section Avenue. That was my childhood home. To this day, I still own 3 properties that are within 3 blocks of that area. And so, as someone who has been watching this area for years and years and years, and watching our residents plagued by this problem, I want to congratulate you, Mr. Powers, and the administration, and everybody involved for this. This is a huge accomplishment, and I appreciate the work that everybody has been involved in, and I'm so happy to hear, and I know the residents that live there appreciate you and everyone else involved.
May I respond to that?
Yes, Commissioner Snyder.
We are just getting started. We need all those people involved in this process and to jump on board and say, let's move forward. But this is the start of that project, and we hope we can bring the community members together and get this completed properly. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Yes, Mrs. Bowling.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate thanking you for putting this out and making the statement. I've been emailing quite a bit with some Elm residents who obviously have very valid and long-standing concerns, and business owners there. And I know that they've been really looking forward to moving forward and also just hearing about the process. I know that I spoke a little bit with some residents, just if anyone's listening, about giving an update. It was not my update to give. So I don't want anyone, I'm glad that we've spoken about it so that folks have some sort of update, and they are all very excited. Everyone's so excited. I'm excited.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
It is exciting.
Any other questions for the mayor? All right, Mr. Bonzo.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. President. Yes, thank you, Mr. President. So I was able to speak to the Finance Committee earlier, and we kind of gave them just an overview of how tax season's gone. Mr. Tax Commissioner Tim Wagers was there as well to really give an update. So I'll repeat some of that, and we'll leave some of that to the Finance Committee. So first off, it's been a very successful tax, week, if you would say. We got actually kind of lucky on the way the dates fell. So this is the first year that we extended tax day past the IRS's deadline, and it's been a fantastic success because it allowed, instead of one day, that whatever the IRS deadline would have been, which this year would have been on a Monday, so that one day being packed with people and people waiting in long lines to get help and get some of their stuff processed. We were able to spread that out from Monday through Thursday. And then we were able to take Friday, and the office closed on Friday, so that we could literally just focus on depositing checks that came in the mail. And I was explaining to the Finance Committee, there's a process in that. We can't just deposit the checks. We have to create or open or pull up the account. We've got to credit the account. And then we, batch all of those, whatever we did that day, they get batched together and then gets deposited. So it's not just, Anna Mary, I feel like, would like to say from the financial supervisors, they would like to believe sometimes that it's just put it in the bank, but it's really not that easy. However, you should see huge improvements from years past on check deposits. So if you hear of anybody, or if there's anybody at home that's watching that, I'm going to say 2 weeks, but it really shouldn't even be that long. But if they haven't had their check deposited within 2 weeks, please reach out to the office and inquire so that we can check on it, because that's a failure in the current process that's happening. It should be much quicker than that. Which is, like I said, there's been times in the past, many years ago when I was on council, that I would hear about checks in June, checks in July that still are deposited. So we're really proud of the improvement there. As well, e-file has been extremely successful. So last year, we didn't launch e-file until March, and it wasn't like super well advertised, but we did have 88 people e-file last year. This year, we've had 419 e-file, and that's already. So last year, the 88 is the full year. 419 is just so far, so we expect more. So just want to appreciate everybody that's used the e-file system. I actually think it helps make things more accurate, because when you do use it, all you do is just enter the information, and it kind of calculates the tax for you. Of course, if you don't think it calculates correctly, because there are special situations out there, you can manually put in how much you're going to pay, and we'll get back to you and figure out who's right. But it's been a huge success. And we've gotten a few, so I've actually had multiple people come up to me. I'm sure you all might have heard a few things as well, but about the staff in the office and just how great the staff's been. I was telling the Finance Committee earlier again that, I'm not on the street often, but when I am on the street, it seems like I'm frequently stopped and said, hey, I just want to commend Ava. I just want to commend Monet. I just want to commend Tim. Jamie, whoever else is, whoever is in the office about how wonderful they are to work with. And if you haven't, if there are any taxpayers out there that have not gotten everything up to date, there's no worries. Like, just come in. Like right now, we're just trying to get people up to date. We've had people come in, thanks to the postcard that we sent out 4 or 5 years of tax returns. And I know it's unfortunate to have to do all that at once, and I know it's stressful, but the amount of relief that people have when they walk out and have that done and know that like they don't have to worry about that anymore, it's huge. So we are here to provide stress relief, and we do encourage people to, come in. But yeah, if there's anything else, I mean, happy to answer any questions, but also, I mean, council, you all, I know multiple of you all have reached out in the last couple of weeks. Continue to do so. I'm here for you. So yeah, I think that's all I got.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Bonzo? Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Bonzo, I've heard the same thing about your office, and I've had some people tell me how it's ran well, and I appreciate all your effort. But I'm more interested in the horror stories of tax season. You got anybody that shows up that's like want to fight you, and that's kind of where I'm more. I know exactly how tax season goes, and I've seen that before, so I'm kind of more into that, really.
Mr. Bonzo?
Yeah, I'll just answer quickly. So while the vast majority of Norwood residents are fantastic to deal with, and we're happy to, yes, the staff does occasionally deal with people that are frustrated. And you all, of course, see that as well. And but they do a really great job of de-escalating. That's not on me. I feel like I would not do as good of a job if I heard some of the stuff that I've heard them hear. So yeah, I would just say that, like, for the most part, Norwood residents shine brightly, and they're very polite, very nice, and we try to reciprocate no matter what. So thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Braden.
Mr. President, thank you. So in other words, we'll talk later about that.
Mrs. Franzen.
Just a brief question. So with the e-file, is that only for this current year's taxes? Can't do for previous years, do they still need to come in?
Mr. Bonzo.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. Yes, so it is only for the current year because at the beginning of the year, there's all these new rules and stuff that are uploaded. So and set. So just the vendor that we use for the e-file, which is the same vendor that does our tax software in general. So thankfully they have that module available. They don't have the flexibility to allow us to do the prior year, but we are definitely happy to help you in the office with anything that you need. But once we do get you caught up, you will be good to go for, hopefully eternity.
Thank you. Good. That's what I've told people.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Bonzo? Thank you. Mr. Miracle.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just to reiterate what I said earlier, tonight's appropriations ordinance was the result of a tremendous amount of work over the past few months by a considerable amount of people. So thank you for that. Thank you for council for passing that expeditiously so that we can move on with that tomorrow. So thank you very much. That's all I have to say this evening.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Miracle? All right. Mr. Moore.
I'll pass on the opportunity.
All right. Thank you. Any unfinished business? Mrs. Hoover.
Thank you, sir. I'm not going to lie, I'm disappointed we don't have our slides because I think I sent you some really lovely ones. Unfinished. Want to announce the yard sales coming up May 10, 11, and 12. Thanks to council, this is now an annual. We don't need to do this every single year. It's just put it in your calendar on repeat, May 10, 11, and 12, and then similar in September. So that's coming up. There will be a tire and Freon event for the city, April 27 and 28. Oh, that's this weekend. This weekend, City Public Works will be doing a tire and Freon event. Also, compost bin sale. If people are interested in composting, I encourage you to get one for cheap. You can get more information on the city website, but the sale will be May 2nd, 15, 18, and June 1. You can get yourself a compost bin. That is all my unfinished business, sir. Thank you.
All right. Any other unfinished business? Any new business? Mrs. Franzen.
I have two things. One, I guess, related to the Freon thing. There is also a free event. This is relevant probably for some people here too. You can take whatever trash, construction trash, lumber, old doors, to, there's a place that Keep Cincinnati Beautiful is the organization doing theirs. There's a free dump day. You can take anything besides paint and some other toxic stuff to a central location in Cincinnati. Go check that out. Keep Cincinnati Beautiful. I would suggest maybe, leaving some time. There's a lot of trailers, a lot of trucks with a bunch of stuff there, but we took some old doors there. It was great. Save you some money, save you some time. It is the last weekend of every month up through October. But if you search for Keep Cincinnati Beautiful, that is where you'll get that information. Also, there's a ribbon cutting for Emily's Garden. This is new business. So, at Hunter Park, that's 11 to 1 p.m., and that is on May, means,
The 11th.
May 11th.
May 11th, some would call it, yes. So there will be a cider there from the cidery, non-alcoholic. It is, again, every time I feel awkward, it's not my garden. It's just called Emily's Garden. It's not me. The other thing I had was I wanted to put this in the Law and Ordinance Committee. This is something that has been kind of annoying me for a little bit. This is Codified Ordinance 1759.01, nuisances. In this, it defines any weeds that are spreading or maturing seeds to be nuisances, including but not limited to ragweed, goldenrod, poison ivy. Yeah, I hate that too. Thistle, milkweed, ironweed, wild mustard. This seems a bit maybe expansive, and I think it might be due for a rewrite to be more specific about what actually are noxious weeds. I would be happy to come and talk about my native plant and invasive plant knowledge, and I'm sure the tree board would be a great source of knowledge for that too. So just wanted to that. I think that's something that could be rewritten to be easier to enforce as well, because you need to do plant ID, and I know trying to ID plants from far away, if you're, for instance, Mark Reeves that has to do this, that could be problematic.
Thank you. Mrs. Bowling.
I got poison ivy last week and did not know that that was a nuisance, so it is. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. It was not in my yard.
Mrs. Hoover.
I just wanted to add on a little bit to Emily's Garden. It is not named after Councilman Franzen. It's named after a Norwood resident who died a few years ago of brain cancer, a young woman. And this is a community project by volunteers. Paul Boys is one of them. It's a really beautiful, magical space. I encourage people to go check it out. Last fall, someone put out on Norwood Strong, hey, I've got extra iris bulbs. And I asked Paul if he wanted them. He said, sure. I grabbed them. Paul took them. He sent me a text the other day. Your irises are blooming in the garden. And I said, they're not my irises. They're Norwood's irises. They were of the giving spirit of Norwood. And that's what I think of when I think about this really special place in Hunter Park. So I encourage folks to come and check out the ribbon cutting. I had the opportunity to do some volunteer there, and it's just really, really special. So I hope to see a lot of folks there. Thank you.
Any other new business? Mrs. Bowling.
I'm just teasing this because details are still in the works, but I want everyone to put June 1st on their calendar because Norwood Diversity Board will be having a Pride celebration. Details to come. Stay tuned. June 1st morning, 10 to 2.
All right. Thank you. Any other? Ms. Royce.
Can I schedule a law and ordinance meeting?
Yes, you can.
I feel like the third Tuesdays usually work best. Is everyone available the 21st? And Ms. Franson, check your calendar as well, since we will need you to talk about the weeds.
I'm sorry, Tuesday, May 21?
Yeah, it's before, the Tuesday before Memorial Day, I believe. Good.
What time?
Do we want to do 6:30? That work? Or we could do 6? Either one.
6 would be better for me.
6?
Yeah, but.
Pause, please. I'm double checking.
No problem.
What day do we say, the 21st?
21st?
Yes.
Okay.
6 works.
6 works, okay.
And that will be in council chambers, correct?
I will put it on the calendar for council chambers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other new business? All right, moving on to communications. First is a letter from Mr. Miracle regarding confirmation of financial reports.
Honorable Joe Eskers and the Honorable City Council, pursuant to the recommendation of the Auditor of State in the report on accounting methods each month, upon completion of the financial report, copies of the reports will be sent via email to all department heads and elected officials for their review. Each month, the receipt of such reports shall be recorded in the minutes of City Council. The following reports will be provided: audit trail by account, bank report, encumbrance report, expense audit trail, expense report for current year, expense report with encumbrance detail, revenue audit trail, revenue report, and statement of cash. Respectfully, Ken Miracle, Auditor.
Thank you. Mr. Braden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Motion to receive and file the letter.
Motion by Mr. Braden to receive and file the letter. Is there a second? Ms. Royce.
I'll second.
Seconded by Ms. Royce. Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Branson?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Gerton?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
Yes, ma'am.
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. Next is a letter from the Ohio Division of Liquor Control regarding a Trex license for Birdie's Coffee LLC. And I will note on here that there is a letter from Mr. Reeves that states Birdie's was initially denied their use as a coffee shop and salon in the R2 residential zone. They appealed the decision to the Zoning Board of Appeals and were granted the use under NCO 1151.41 corner lot provision. The owners would have to reapply to the building department for the expanded use. Their liquor license should not just be granted without additional input from the surrounding residents. That was the only objection. Mrs. Hoover.
Are you requesting receive and file the letter? It's a question.
I believe the action that would need to be taken here is to receive and file without objection or to receive and file with an objection to the transfer.
Mr. President?
Mr. Moore.
Thank you. This is a Trex transfer, which is different than the other ones that have come before council. It is a special kind of permit. Most of them are governed by a quota system. Norwood's got so many open. In a lot of places, that was found to be a problem because if, for example, Norwood, they're all filled up with like neighborhood bars, all the permits are taken, but we want to build Rookwood or we want to build Factory 52. Well, come on, we can't just stop economic development because of that. So this is a way for, with council approval, well, the city's approval, actually, I can sign it. I don't have to ask anybody, but I don't do that. In order to spur economic development is the purpose of this kind of a transfer. It's like this will promote economic development and job creation in Norwood. So we will allow them to transfer a permit in from another location. And that's what this is. So this is a different kind of thing. Is the city has to approve it. It's not like we object. The objection process is we can object, but we have to have very specific and limited grounds to object and have it upheld. Zoning is not one of those grounds on a regular. They don't care. They don't care if it's not zoned for a business. It's residential. They'll give them the permit anyway. But this is up to council, and so there's no reason you need to necessarily decide it tonight if you want to have some more discussion about it. But I just wanted you to know this is a different kind of thing, and if you don't think it's going to spur economic development or you don't think it's a good idea, the city cannot approve it.
Thank you. Mrs. Boland.
Would this perhaps be an issue better suited for the Small Business Committee? Could I motion that we send it to the Small Business Committee?
You'd like to place the matter into the Small Business and Economic Development Committee?
I would.
Since this is not a new business, that would require a motion. That is a motion?
Yes, and then also could we schedule a Small Business and Economic Development Committee meeting?
Do you want to receive and file and place it in?
would you like to amend your motion to receive and file the letter and place the matter into Economic Development and Small Business Committee?
I would like to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion? Mrs. Franzen?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Hoover?
I just have some questions about what would a involvement with the building department to connect with the neighboring residents. I'm not sure if there's anyone in the room that would know that.
Mr. Moore?
I think what thank you, Mr. President. I think what Mr. Reese is referring to is that because they have a permissive use, and it was approved for a specific kind of business, and so in order to expand that type, to add on to that type of business that was allowed as a permissive use, they would have to go through the building department, through the BZA again, have a hearing on that, and that would be noticed to the neighbors before that hearing on the permissive use, to expand the permissive use. I think that's what he's referring to.
Mr. Braden?
Thank you, Mr. President. Question through the chair to, I guess, the law department. So first, a comment. I don't know that putting it in the committee is granted here. I think my question would be, should we receive and file without or pending decision from the BCA, maybe? Would that work in this situation?
Mr. Moore?
Because I guess from what I got, they got the tracks, they're bringing it in, but they can't really use it until they get the zoning changed. They're not going to let them. Am I correct?
Mr. Moore?
We can enforce the building code against them, but we can't stop them from having the permit. Can we? It gets complicated. It's complicated jurisdictions there. But yeah, I mean, you're right. We can't. The way this process works, though, it's not like we object or not object. It's that it doesn't happen until we sign it. Somebody for the city's got to sign saying we're good with this. So if council wants to put it in committee to talk about it, that's one way to go about that. Or council can think about it. But the decision is going to be, do we want to allow it or not? We could wait. I'm not sure what that does for the time. I'm not sure how long they might have before Ohio Department of Liquor Control decides, oh, sorry, it's been too long. But I know we've had some that have gone on for a while. It's not been, oh, you've got 2 weeks to answer like the normal ones.
Mrs. Bowling?
Okay, with that additional information, I'm going to amend my amended motion. I don't believe we need to put it in committee since the building and zoning is going to take care of that community conversation from what I understand.
Mr. Moore?
Well, now I think it's the mayor can sign it. I think maybe Noah can sign it. I can sign it to give them approval. My policy has been not going to do it without council saying it's okay. So I'm not going to sign it unless council says it. This way we have 4 people that vote yes to say it's okay. So whatever it is you guys want to do, whatever it is, Mr. President, whatever it is council decides to do, then what a majority of council decides to do, then that is what I will do. What I can do is contact the gentleman from, I think it's a gentleman from Dinsmore and Shoal, and say, this is one of the issues we have and it's being considered while council considers it.
Then perhaps I would like to amend to table until our next council meeting.
So you are amending the amended motion to now
We're all going to regret giving me any control over making motions.
to table this matter until the next council meeting.
Yes. This is confusing.
Technically, there's a motion to table, so there shouldn't be any more discussion.
Yep.
Mrs. Franzen, will you amend your
I
second?
would love to amend my second.
All right. Motion on the floor is to receive and oh, no, it is not. The motion on the floor is to table until the next meeting. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
No.
Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
No.
Mr. Gerton?
The motion is to table this?
Until the next council meeting.
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
No, ma'am.
the vote of 4 to 3, 4 in favor, 3 against, that motion carries. We have no absent members. Is there a motion to adjourn? Mrs. Bowling,
I would love to motion to adjourn.
is there a second? Mrs. Hoover?
second.
Motion by Mrs. Bowling to adjourn, seconded by Mrs. Hoover. Call the roll, please.
Mrs. Franzen?
Yes.
Mrs. Hoover?
Yes.
Ms. Royce?
Yes.
Mrs. Bowling?
Yes.
Mrs. Winterbauer?
Yes.
Mr. Gerton?
Yes.
Mr. Braden?
All members present voting yes, the motion carries. This meeting is hereby adjourned.
Hey, Candace,